Okay, you are live.
Right. Well, welcome everybody to the December 14th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. Quorum being present, this meeting shall come to order. The commission operates pursuant to land use article of the annotated code for the state of Maryland. Local authority for the commission is derived from municipal code of the city of Annapolis, chapter 21, section 56. The purpose of the HPC is to preserve sites, structures, and districts of historical, cultural, archaeological, and architectural significance. Requirements for serving on the commission are detailed in section 21, chapter 21, section 8.06. The HPC operates pursuant to the State of Maryland Open Meetings Act, and therefore no pending application shall be discussed between or amongst commissioners outside the public hearing. Okay. Next on our agenda is our roll call. If you would just acknowledge your presence by unmuting yourself and saying hi. Bill Williams.
Hi.
Kim Finch.
Aye.
Bobby Collins.
Aye.
Kevin Smith.
Hi.
Leslie Xavier.
Aye.
And my name is Tim Leahy. I serve as chair. Bobby Collins, I forgot to mention, serves as vice chair. We also have John Tower, who is chief of preservation, with us. Representatives from the Office of Law. I think I saw Joelle Braithwaite, yes. And Cheryl Wood are here. Jackie Rouse from the Office of Planning is here. Hi, Mike Malinoff also is here from the Planning and Zoning Office. Kimberly Consoli is our recorder, and she'll make sure I cross all the T's and dot all the I's. I think I got that right. All right. Next on our agenda, well, let me have the planning commissioners introduce themselves to who are here. So Bob, will you lead the charge on that?
Yes. Hi, good evening. This is Bob. I'm Bob Waldman, and I'm currently the vice chair and accompanied by Diane Butler, who's here. And we expect to see Ben Sale a little later. And I don't know where Alex Pline or David Iams are, but I wouldn't be surprised if they drop in after you guys get rolling.
All right, great. Thank you. Next on our agenda is announcements. John Tower, any announcements that you'd like to share with the group?
Well, let's see. We have, well, I don't want to go into violations. We continue to be busy. We have interesting projects that staff is working on, especially African-American cultural projects, and I don't see any slowdown in sight. Of course, we're going to focus on one of our very interesting new requirements, which is outdoor furnishings and fixtures tonight. So anyone who would like to stay for that discussion is welcome.
That's great. Okay. Other commissioners, any announcements? Okay. I also forgot to formally welcome David Jarrell, the city manager, and Ellie Tierney, alderwoman from Ward 1.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
Next on the agenda is approval of draft minutes. We have one set of minutes up for approval tonight from November 9th. Are there any changes or comments on the agenda, on the minutes? All right, hearing none, I will take a motion for approval, please.
I move that we approve the minutes from November 19th, or excuse me, but November 9th, 2021.
I second it.
Okay. Been moved and second. All in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstain. Great. So the draft minutes are approved. Everyone was present at that meeting. So, okay. Next on the agenda is violations and status of any active violations. John, please report.
Well, the most noteworthy violation of the last month occurred at the Maryland Inn. I was surprised to see that a mason was preparing joints with failing mortar for repointing. I stopped them. The mason came to the offices. We discussed the fact that the Maryland Historic Trust had an easement. He prepared a certificate of approval. I looked at it, needed work, went back later that day to find him in the process of repointing and gave him a stop work order. I thought that was pretty bold, but anyway, so we're we're moving forward.
Okay, great. And I noticed the work is continuing on the corner of South Street and Cathedral Street.
Yeah,
This is the site of a prior violation.
So if it's not a violation, but I
Well,
have
they
told,
haven't. Yeah.
right. I have told that applicant that he needs to follow his conditions of approval.
Okay, it wasn't
And-
approved.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did not approve his windows. Now we know from past experience that Mr. Crespo doesn't always follow directions. However, I'm working with him and I'm looking forward to a good outcome. He is
Okay.
making progress.
Great. All right, thank you. Okay. Next in the agenda is a special presentation of the City Dock Resiliency Plan, and we have a cast of characters, right, here tonight?
We do.
We do. So Eileen, I will turn it over to you for introductions. Just to set, I guess, the stage a little bit, this is a presentation. Thank you for coming. We eventually will go through our particular process in the HPC of pre-applications. And I'm sure that the Planning Commission will have a series of presentations. So we're not really sure when those are scheduled and when, and we don't really know yet how you're going to break it into pieces for multiple pre-applications perhaps. So tonight is just I think your first opportunity to present some ideas and maybe get some feedback. But I think really tonight is more about you telling us things. If you want us to comment, please let us know. But it is kind of a little different than, it's not on the agenda as a pre-application, but there's not much difference between a pre-application and a presentation. So that being said.
Thank you so much. And of course, we always want to hear the commission's HPC and Planning Commission comments. We're delighted to be here. This is a huge milestone. Tonight is the kickoff for the design of the city dock. This process will take a full year. So starting tonight, the commission, both HPC and Planning Commission, will have lots of opportunity and lots of involvement as we move forward. Tonight, we're going to be updating you on the progress with Hillman Garage, its construction, parking and mobility plans, and again, the kickoff for the design of City Dock. We have with us tonight, I noticed Rodney Moss from Hunt and Amber. We're delighted to have Rodney. He is our partner in AMRP. Our city manager, David Gerald, Ivan Doolin, project manager, Bryce Turner, architect, Scott Reichel, landscape architect, and David D., a resiliency expert from WSP. As you all are aware, I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to, rather than tell you about the urgency, let our city manager talk to you about that. David?
Thank you, Eileen. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us come and talk about the concept designs that we have for City Dock. Of course, all of you that were here at the end of October, this last October, saw a preview of the future if we don't start dealing with sea level rise downtown. And this picture pretty graphically shows that. So we intend to do this sort of once in a generation project, the biggest project that the city's taken on in its history down at City Dock. And we're very excited to get started with the process. Before we move on, I just wanted to say thank you to both HPC and the Planning Commission. for the work that you did on Hillman Garage. We're getting ready to start that project during the first quarter of next year. Your input and your recommendations and the work that you did on that was so helpful, and we are so appreciative of all that you did on that project. As I've said in other forums, the city dock is going to be Hillman Garage on steroids because it's such a large project and such an important project for the downtown area. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So as you all know, that you all approved the Hillman Garage design back in October. Planning Commission also approved the site design. Again, thanks for all of your efforts on that. That allows us to queue up that project and get ready to start demolition next year. Next slide, please. So construction of Hillman starts next year. We're going to focus on, so that phase also includes the design of City Dock. Right now, we're at a very conceptual design level. It's basically the concepts that came out of the consensus plan for the City Dock Action Committee. That's going to be the jumping off point for the design of this project. And then, so as Eileen mentioned, that will be about a year-long project. Hopefully, about this time next year, we'll be ready to start the City Dock construction. There's going to be a little bit of an overlap between the garage project and City Dock, but we're not going to touch any of the parking down at City Dock until the new garage is complete. We don't need to make the already short situation with parking downtown any worse by start taking out the parking at City Dock. So there'll be an overlap, but it'll be mostly around the edges of City Dock starting next winter. And with that, I think it comes back to Eileen. So once again, thank you all for your input and recommendations for us.
Thanks, David. I think what's amazing, and I put this slide up here just to remind everyone watching, I know the commission, Planning Commission and HPC know, this was 1 year ago, December 17th, 2020, when we kicked off the process 1 year after the City Dock Action Plan had been endorsed by the City Council. So the implementation process has been just a year, and here we are on the precipice of being able to start construction. We've had 11 work sessions with the Planning Commission and HPC. And as David pointed out, both bodies have clearly guided the direction and the design of Hillman Garage. And I think we're all very, very proud. And as you can see from this list, we've had another 20, well, there are 34 work sessions altogether, in addition to HPC and the Planning Commission with downtown businesses, residents, the council, City Dock Action Committee. And this level of engagement with certainly the HPC and the Planning Commission will continue, as in fact, it'll probably we'll probably have more engagement given the complexity of the City Dock, and the same level of engagement will continue with the community. Next slide, please. So where we are right now, the next 2 months, is a strategic approach toward rebuilding Hillman Garage. But what's really important is, what are we going to do while Hillman Garage is down? So how are we going to provide parking options for each of the user groups? How are we going to move people around with a unique mobility plan? And what is the messaging? How are we going to get out to people so that they know that Annapolis is open for business? Next slide, please. So first, the big message is there is lots of parking available. Between Park Place and City Dock, there are more than 3,000 spaces available. Our challenge is getting the right users to the right locations. There's no shortage of parking. Next slide, please. With that said, the city has kicked off its parking strategy by first relocating the Hillman garage parkers. 120 municipal employees will move to Park Place. 128 monthly pass holders will move to Gotts and Knighton, so that instead of looking at 440 parkers that need to be located, we're basically looking at 200 visitors and transient uses. Right now, today in downtown, there are more than 300 available close-in garage spaces. So there's more than enough room to get people who want to be parked downtown. We just have to be able to direct them properly. Next slide, please. So first come the customers. What's critical for the downtown businesses is that these spaces in Gotts, in Whitmore, Donner, that these spaces go first to the customers, because that is the lifeblood of our downtown economy. In addition to that, there certainly will be the on-street parking. And the issue here is a very aggressive messaging campaign through the website, social media, and working directly with the downtown businesses so that they'll be advertising on their websites and getting the word out to their customers of where to park. Secondly, the visitors, again, the real goal is messaging, so that they do not drive downtown, that we capture them at Park Place. We will have an enhanced shuttle service, but we will also have VIA, who is a vendor with the city, to have on-demand service to bring people back and forth from Park Place. And there will be extensive weekend and evening parking at Gotts, Whitmore, and Bladen. I mean, there are hundreds of spaces for the weekend and the evening. For the downtown employees, there are a couple of very good options, because we really want to disincentivize the employees from parking in the neighborhoods. First, there's Park Place with the shuttle and VIA to get back and forth. Secondly, the Graduate Hotel has 80 plus spaces available for monthly parking at reasonable rates. And then, of course, there are the close-in garages. Next slide, please. For the residents, the big issue for the residents is they want to make sure people who would normally park at Hillman are not in their neighborhood. So the city manager and the mayor have led the effort to protect the residential neighborhood. They are doing that by introducing Park Mobile throughout much of the Ward 1 neighborhood. That will be in place before the garage comes down. It will be the most expensive parking, so that it will be really disincentivized for anyone to pay to park in the neighborhoods. And the residents, of course, their on-street parking is included for free with their residential parking permit. There will be greatly enhanced enforcement to make sure that for those people who want to pay all that money to park in the neighborhood, that they are not in violation. Next slide, please. We will be moving people around with a combination of mobility options. First, and again, different mobility options for different user groups. The circulator will be augmented with an additional circulator. It'll be we'll be looking at 10-minute times to make sure that the circulator is dependable. For rush hour, the focus will be getting city employees and other employees from Park Place to downtown, and then at the end of the day, back to Park Place. So that will be the focus for the circulator. There'll be a 10-minute trolley loop that will be close in, certainly in the warm weather peak season. And that will be a continuous loop that people can hop on. They can go from Gotts, Knighton, Whitmore, any of these garages, and be right downtown. And then the third aspect will be what we call on-demand service. The on-demand service, again, is with VIA, our vendor. VIA will have 3 vehicles, microtransit, and they will have 2 purposes. They will have a fixed route where people can wait to be picked up, and that will be in a 10-minute or less wait time. And they will also have an on-demand service where people can call and be picked up. So there'll be lots of options that are accessible, that are fun, that will be easy for people to use to get people downtown. Next slide, please. So with that said, we want to kick off our presentation and discussion with the HPC and the Planning Commission about the city dock design. What is critical is we will be looking for approvals from both the Planning Commission and the HPC. So your direction is critical to us. We also want to hear from and work with our stakeholders, as we have throughout the process, businesses, downtown businesses and residents, but as importantly, our partners like the boat show. We will be working closely with the boat show. They have raised several issues that we will work with them very early in the process on: infrastructure for their tents, a level surface that can handle heavy equipment, forklifts, 10,000 pound forklifts. Why can't I say that word? They have concerns about trees and shade structures that we'll be working with them on. And then, of course, the distribution of electric power, sewer, and water. So all of that will be part of the process the next year from now through spring of 2023. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to, I don't know if it's Rodney and Ivan or just Ivan. Next slide.
Yeah, thank you, Eileen, and want to thank both the HPC and the Planning Commission for the work to date on Hillman, and as David mentioned, the process here for the City Dock project is we hope to build on kind of the work that we've done on Hillman and the process there, and make the City Dock process as successful. So this will be this kind of a kicking off point. I thought before we get into a little bit of updates around kind of our design, I'll hand it over to Bryce to go through a little bit of the City Dock consensus plan and some of the features there, and then we'll progress in and talk a little bit about kind of the work we've done to date. So Bryce, over to you.
Thank you, Ivan, and thanks all. Good to see you again. This is going to be a very interesting process, obviously an important one, to receive input from HPC and other groups, of course, as we go through this process. You know, the plan that you're looking at here in front of you is the consensus plan, which was a label that we came up with, because it's not meant to be a fully designed plan, but it did represent the consensus of a lot of different people, almost 100 people, of course, in the City Dock Action Committee. But more importantly, perhaps, it's also been built upon the shoulders, if you will, of a number of other studies that have been done in Annapolis through the years. As you know, beginning with another ULI TAP by Washington District Council, the master plan process that was done, cultural landscape plans have been developed, the ULI Baltimore TAP that was done more recently, then of course the City Dock Action Committee. So, you know, there have been a lot of good ideas, a lot of ideas vetted, some have gone away. We have, I think we've all resisted the temptation to put new buildings in this master plan other than those that are essential for the functioning and improvement of City Dock in terms of resiliency, especially. So those will be some things we'll talk about further tonight. But I just want to mention that this is such a great example of green infrastructure investment. I think something we should all be very proud of, that we've gotten this far already. There's still a lot of work to do, much design and planning input that's going to be needed to get this plan to where it needs to be. We all understand that, but it is a great example of green infrastructure, and I think we should all be proud to be a part of it. I think we're going to see a lot more of this in our world. So this plan before you is the one that City Dock Action Committee approved, if you will, put forth. And I'm pleased that the next plan that you see that the AMRP team has been involved in with WSP as civil engineer and Mahan Reichel landscape architects looks very much like this. You know, we're beginning to get into a lot more details that make it come to life, of course. My role with BCT Design Group is as master planner here. I was involved in the action group originally, and then joined the AMRP team, which has been helpful for some continuity, of course. So with that, I just want to pass it along to WSP and Mahan Reichel, who are going to carry a lot of the load this evening to get into the details of the plan. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Bryce. Ahead of what we want to do is kind of walk through the different aspects of the plan and kind of break it down and provide a little bit more detail. Tim, to your question earlier about if we would like feedback, the answer is yes, absolutely. One of the things that we're interested in is kind of understanding or recognizing that you've only had kind of a limited amount of time to look at this, but at least kind of your initial, everybody's kind of initial impressions, as well as to round out talking a little bit about how we can divide and conquer, because this is a substantial area of the city, and a lot of detail is required to get into, and we hopefully can or we have some suggestions about manageable ways that we might be able to do so. As we get going, so as Bryce mentioned, this is the plan, conceptual plan in front of you on the screen is developed on the basis of the consensus plan, and the design here was something that we developed as part of the feasibility review process that we had under our agreement with the city. This will continue the design development as Eileen mentioned throughout the year, and just to reemphasize, because I know other folks might be watching, and it's an important point that our parking will not be affected at the city dock until Hillman Garage is complete. So with that. The conceptual plan focuses on an area from Gate 0 at the Naval Academy to 110 Compromise. One of the reasons why we've kind of looked at or limit the initial scope to this area is it does two things. It avoids or minimizes the amount of work in the water, and limits the work to public property. And there are kind of two reasons for that, to focus on that, and that is to provide the baseline and foundation of protection of the city dock area. This is it, and then we can then move on further from here with expanding the scope of protection down the line. And this is a theme that you'll hear us hit upon at several times during the presentation about getting the foundation for resiliency and protection correct, and then being able to adjust the amount of protection, be it sea level or otherwise in the future. It is a large area, and Scott Reichel from Mahan Reichel will kind of walk us through these sections as you see on the screen in front, A through G. We have kind of try to use that description or that numbering consistently to kind of guide and hopefully help explain kind of where we are when we're talking about the different components as we move forward. And what we're hoping to do, and we'll, after we've gone through the presentation, pick up on this point again, but like how do we divvy up or manage to eat this proverbial elephant, so to say, from a planning and design review? There are a couple of different elements that have some similarities, which is we think might make sense to look at together from a kind of design and approval standpoint. The first is, as you'll see here, from 8 through B3. So this is what is currently Donner parking lot, which we're proposing a small park space through the initial part of the promenade. All has very kind of similar features, current seawall construction that we will use as the foundation of the design. So that's why that's kind of grouped together in one piece. Then we'll talk a lot about the area around the pump station and City Dock Plaza area, which you can see here is C on the screen, which has a lot of utilities, vertical construction in the form of the actual pump house. And then we have area D and E, which is the new park space and Susan Campbell Park. So out park an event type area with a lot of similar features, a lot of the similar challenges and issues to deal with when it comes to both view sheds and walking areas, etc. And then lastly, not circled for now, but that is G and F, which can follow, which is more on the streetscape side, as well as the interface between Burtis House and the Harbormaster Building, which there'll be more stakeholder involvement with, and we recognize that that might draw out a little bit more in time accordingly. So this is just a little bit of background of how we've of the plan as a whole, and how we kind of see some natural groupings of the different areas for review purposes. But we'll touch on that again towards the end of the presentation. So with that, and I'll hand it over to David D to talk a little bit about some of the prime drivers for this project and how we're thinking about addressing those.
Thanks, Ivan. So this slide basically looks at the planning horizon and what we're looking at for timing of implementation, looking at seeking balance between our design and future. Majority of the current flooding is caused by storm drains and pump station inadequate capacity. So the first stage we're going to implement is, if you look down at the bottom cross section there, is by raising the promenade around the entire City Dock area, except for Susan Campbell Park, to elevation 5, we'll be able to address nuisance flooding and the majority of flooding events for the next 10 to 15 years. So that will primarily be stage 1. Also at the same time, you can see the seat wall there at elevation 6.5, and all the way over to the far right, elevation 6.5 in the elevated park area. That would also be addressing the 100-year storm event for existing conditions. You can see on the right, the flood wall barrier, it's got an elevation of 8 shown. That would be something that we could provide the infrastructure to, so that in the future, as needed or as the budget allowed, we could provide the ability to increase the height of the flood wall and the seawall barrier. If you go to this next slide here, This just basically shows you the existing water surface levels associated with existing flood events. You can see on the right side, the elevated promenade where the people are walking. That is at elevation 5 in the proposed project. So by putting it at elevation 5, you can see that everything below that is being addressed with our current design. Again, on the right side, the flood wall at elevation 6.5, the barrier height, would protect against the record flood, which was basically Hurricane Isabel in 2003. In the future, if you go to the next slide, looking at year 2050, once again, the elevated promenade is shown, and all we've done differently in this slide is basically increase the flood wall barrier height to a maximum elevation of 8, which would basically be providing protection against the 100-year storm. And this is also addressing sea level rise and using our NAV D88 elevations as our reference. If you go to the next slide. Scott, do you want to talk about this one?
Sure, sure. So as Ivan mentioned, we've basically broken down the areas A through G. And what we're doing is converting some of the parking areas into green space in A with Donner Park, and D, which is the large parking lot that would become that raised green space. We're talking about raising the entire promenade to the basic flood level protection. The storm drain and pump stations improvements, which are already in process, the accessibility improvements, so there'll be ADA accessibility to all these areas. Reduced heat island effect just by adding the green space, and shade trees. We're proposing a number of shade trees. And one of the things that we hear all the time, I'm working up here in Baltimore, is that the Inner Harbor lacks shade and people really suffer in the summer. And I think that we'd like to avoid that here if we could get trees along the promenade as much as can without blocking views. And then the future Harbormaster Building with the Burtis House and National Park Service. And then EV chargers that would be for smaller vessels and cars, obviously. So next.
So this slide is basically just presenting you with a couple of different types of flood barrier options that we're considering in the design. If you look on the upper right, we're basically showing you a couple of different schemes. The blue line that basically goes around the inner part of Eagle Alley is a transparent flood wall with railing. You can see that in the lower right picture, along with a barrier wall, as well as in the lower left picture, it would be on the left side. This basically provides the best view shed coming from the residents, the restaurants, the businesses. The second option that we're looking at is around the elevated park area and then going up toward the Burtis House. That's the red line. That's a concrete flood wall with a brick veneer finish, for example. You can see that in the very bottom right picture. It just says top of wall elevation 8.0. It's just a full solid wall basically to elevation 8.0. In the future, as needed, we could raise that elevation up. The second middle option, which is a yellow line, basically allows for a passive flip up flood barrier, which as the water rises, the gate would rise. You can see that wherever there's openings between the transparent flood wall with railings, as well as the concrete flood wall with brick veneer, just a couple of different options we're looking into. The next slide shows you several real life flood barriers that are implemented and in place. On the left side top is basically a flood break gate shown that has been deployed. So originally it laid flat, and as the water levels rose, The gates rise, and you can see them sitting up now with the support in the water. So you're looking at this flood protection barrier from the water's side. Down in the pictures below, it's a little bit more expensive option, but it is basically just a promenade along the waterfront there with pavers installed on the flood break gate, and that's in the non-deployed condition. And then if you look on the right side of the picture, the right picture, as the flood waters rise, the flood break gate is deployed and it rises along with it to provide that protection. It's the best looking option. It's just also the most costly option. You can see up on the right, there's just a couple of isometric layouts showing the flip up flood gate and then the isometric layout of the rising flood wall. Next slide. All right, I'll turn that back over to Scott.
Thank you, David. So I'll take you through these areas A through E, the beginning with Donner Park. So we're proposing that Donner Park become a pocket park, basically keeping most of it in open green space, so it can still be used for events and could accommodate a tented event. But what we've done is we've widened the promenade along Ego Alley. We've also widened the area right at 110 Compromise to accommodate tables and chairs as well as shade trees there. We've created a pergola and seat option that's up along Ego Alley that could either have porch swings or stationary benches, but that they could be moved in events, so that could become vendor stations. And then basically native bay landscapes at the edges. And what along Compromise Street, there would be an 8-foot or the elevation 8 for the wall that would, so Donner would be one of the areas that in flood events could still, would be temporarily inundated. And then we would ramp up to the streets. You can see the ramp on the far left that ramps up to the sidewalk along, leading to where Alex Haley's statue is. Okay, next. So these are various sections along the promenade that I'll walk you through, starting from the upper left. That's the existing condition at Compromise and the Alex Haley statue. So you can see that the bulkhead is at basically 4.5 and the streets at 2 and the walkways at 2.5. We're proposing that we raise that all up to the bulkhead level. And then we would have a railing or some sort of flood barrier that would either, depending on which option we choose, that would come up and protect that, that area would get inundated and it would protect water from coming into the marketplace area, for example. The next one on the upper right, that's the area. If you look up in the upper right, there's a key map that shows you where that that section is taken, and just above it, we're proposing that we raise the promenade up to the level 5, which is the bulkhead level. You can see dashed below it, dashed below the orange line, that's the existing height of the promenade. And the width, you can see the curve there is the rectangle. We'll raise that up, expand it, so we'll have a good 18 plus feet. We're proposing that we put trees up at that level, and that would be in planters. And then obviously, depending on what type of wall that David was taking you through, would be at that far end. We've changed that. There is angled parking currently along Dock Street. We're going to change that to parallel just in that strip. And we provided for a 4-foot courtesy sidewalk. So when you get out of your car, there's an area to exit and then step up to the promenade. And what you're not seeing in that section is there's periodic breaks in that wall that would get you up to the promenade level. The bottom right is the section out at the green space that David had already sort of taken you through. But what we've done is we've got the existing boardwalk there that's approximately plus or minus 8 feet. We're adding a 12-foot promenade at the same level, 12-foot width. So we get about a 20-foot section of promenade, and then stadium type seating that would allow you, seat walls that step up that would allow you to look out into Ego Alley, and also provides for a seat wall to look back into the park space. And the park space would be at 6.5, as David had said, on the lawn panel. I'll take you through that and the next couple of slides. So next. So this is sort of we're saying the foyer to the living room. It's right by the pump house. And what we're doing is we're transitioning from the current level of 2.5 to 3, which is right there at the parking lot. And rather than having a huge step up to the 6.5, we're going up in 2-foot increments. So we would step up to that plaza, and we are planning to have some sort of a water feature there, whether it be splash pad or misting pad, or even just a water feature, something there. And then that has accessibility. If you look to the top of that, between the pump house and this foyer area, if you will, there's a handicap access. That's a ramp that takes you all the way up from the parking lot to the level 6.5, and you can get in at 4.5 to access this level. And Bryce will take you through there are restrooms in the pump house proposed, and they're at level 7, so you'd go up the handicap ramp and up again. Next. Bryce, I think this was.
Thank you, Scott. As I unmute slowly. So this is the plan of the pump house building. It's fairly complicated how this works. It took us some time to really understand the engineering for this, and I'd like to walk you through some of the major components. We have the need here to get trucks up onto the park. That we will need to get equipment up there in some way, and you can see at the bottom of this plan, just below the building and between the fountain plaza, if you will, some V-shaped symbols that indicate the ramp, which is sloping up to the park. That's going to be necessary probably for the boat show as well as for maintenance. And what we learned is that this pump house building includes a very large generator, as well as pumps that go down into the ground that enable the pumping of water and back and forth. So if you notice, there are toilets which are shown at the middle of the plan in gray. Those we think will be important to maintain as the Harbormaster Building, which is currently in this location, is demolished. Then we feel that public toilets are very important here. The area to the left of the toilets is shown here. I believe that's plus or minus 4 feet above sea level. That is the tops of the pumps that are the equipment that is needed here. It's going to be a bit like, probably manhole covers, large pieces of equipment, but that are level flush with the grade that's 4 feet above sea level. Around that, we're studying a small seat wall or some landscaping to help conceal that space, but it'll be open air above that. There'll be no real roof above that area is our understanding and our desire, I think. The large rectangle that you see just above the toilets is a generator. It's a very large generator, needs to be open air. And to the right of that, which is shown in gray, is electrical meters and electrical equipment that's required to drive this whole operation. So the engineers felt it was important that we allow for trucks to come up to this portion of the this building onto the right-hand side and be able to access the generator to work on it, as well as the pumps below. We have begun doing a little bit of sketching on this building. I think it's going to be appropriate to get into it in our next meeting, really, and it's not part of this presentation tonight. But this building is, it's approximately, that overall rectangular space is about 2,000 square feet. It's almost 65 feet by 32, but much of that is not covered, as I said, and it won't feel that large. The actual structure itself will be more like, say, 40 by 35 feet, about 1,400 to 1,500 square feet. So that's where we are currently with this pump house building, beginning to look at how we make this a very attractive small structure that fits in with the character of Annapolis. And that's going to be very important. I'm sure everyone will agree. Next slide.
So the largest green space that we have between that Fountain Plaza and Susan Campbell Park is raised, elevated green plateau, basically at 6.5. It'll provide, nice views back up Main Street as well as out into the harbor. And the key here is this has to be a flexible space. This has to be a space that works well when a few people are in it and can accommodate large events. And so we've kept trees out to the edges of it so that it basically can accommodate tents. And as Bryce said, and as Eileen said, it will have to accommodate heavy equipment as well. So we're currently researching right now how this will be natural turf and how we'll be able to cover it and protect it when there are large events. There are handicap ramps at every corner that get you up to the ADA ramps that will get you up to the space. This entire area would have flip ups at the stairs. They're different. You can see breaks in the seat walls along the edge. From the harbor, it's up 2 feet, and from Dock Street, it's just a 2-foot difference on that. The elevation of Dock Street is higher. So next. And this is that section that you'd seen, but this is maybe now makes a little more sense. This is along that area. You can see the lawn space to the right. We have that seat wall that's at elevation 8 that protects that whole area. The red line is a flip-up gate in the stair system that would get the entire thing protected from floods at the 8-foot level. And then the seat walls and the trees along the edge that get down to the promenade level. And then you can see we will match the promenade elevation with the boardwalk that's existing. Next. And then Susan Campbell Park, this is a concept that we came up with that would actually reduce the number of trees there, but we would have shade structures that could be taken down and put back up. But the idea is that they provide protection from rain as well as shade, and again, could have temporary seating elements that could be taken down and put up, like, for example, porch swings, low plantings that ring that area. This area is also key for we have groups waiting to get on tour boats that congregate here. So it's nice that they would have a place to get in shade. And then in the center of the space, it's basically a flex space that would allow for games like cornhole, table tennis, things like that are movable and could be brought in and taken out. And it's a place for the city to really program. You could see that there could be concerts out here. And this area is staying at the same level. So again, it's at the level basically 4 to 5. So it could get periodic inundation at a flood, at an 8-foot level flood. Next.
So this area is just above kind of plan north, slightly north of, sorry, I got Siri talking to me here. And this area around the Burtis house is one of the things where one of the areas of the plan that we really need some good input on, I think. It's going to be interesting. We probably have the least amount of detail for this currently. We put this sketch plan together just to try to work through some of the issues that we felt were coming together in this particular location. So what you see here at the very top of the building, just below those kind of round green trees, is the original Burtis house, which is, you know, it's approximately, say, 35 feet square, approximately, and 2 stories, of course. The Burtis house study that was prepared, I guess 6 months ago now, with input from National Park Service, of course, and Preservation Maryland and Historic Annapolis. Michael Dowling worked on that document. It was contemplated to do an addition just below that, plan south of the Burtis, and to attach it to the Burtis house. There was a lot of historic research that was done. And if you go through that document, you'll see that it's really the massing of that structure with its addition will feel very much in character with some of the historic city dock structures that were once there, but are no longer there. And that's all based on, of course, old maps, photographs, and everything that we could find. Just below that, we have the need for functional space for the Harbormaster, as well as boating facilities. And I think this is incredibly important. The boating facilities for Annapolis really should be world-class. It is a world-class sailing port, and we would hope that there is an opportunity here to have bathrooms and showers, as well as some small community space, possibly washers and dryers, that would occur in this location. We've done some layouts. This building is approximately 1,800 square feet that we're showing. It's about 36 by 50. We think that would accommodate this in a relatively minimal way. I mean, it's not going to be a large boaters facility like you would see in a lot of other places, but we think it could suffice and would be, all in all, could be better than what we have today in the Harbormaster Building. The uses in the Burtis house and its addition, from the report, it's not completely clear what those are going to be. I don't think anybody knows exactly yet. As you know, that there's been a study as to, you know, how to mothball this building and to take care of it in the interim until final funding becomes available. But visitor center, National Park Service, gateway to the Chesapeake type uses that would happen in this building. I had hoped that there might be room in that building for an upper level, possibly to accommodate the Harbormaster function in the second level of that structure. There's and/or that could happen in the adjacent structure next door. So this is really what we've got to figure out. It is currently outside of the scope of work of AMRP, but it needs to be addressed, of course, and it's very important to the success of City Dock here. I think it would make sense for us to continue and to work through this. I've been in touch with Michael Dowling about this a few times. Michael is interested in consulting with us on some of this as well as at the pump house building. And so I think we need to work through some of those details. I don't have any three-dimensional vertical design for this tonight. The Burtis House report does have some three-dimensional design for the Burtis House in the addition, and obviously we'd want to keep in character with that. We think there could be an opportunity to have this small alley, if you will, between the two buildings that could be a nice space. but this basically occurs right at the end of Dock Street, kind of in front of latitude 38. The floodproofing continues across at this location in a manner that is similar to what's happening everywhere else, obviously, and that we would tie into Gate 0 with the Naval Academy at that 8-foot level. You'll notice, I think it's worthwhile to note that there is a walkway that goes right under this Burtis House addition, and this was a design feature that Michael Dowling incorporated. I thought was kind of interesting and based on some historic structures that were there that had a porch-like configuration. So this is where we are currently with the Burtis House and the addition. As I said, it's currently outside our scope of services, but we'd like to get it addressed. And it's very, very important for the overall success of City Dock, of course. Next slide.
Yeah, and which kind of brings us back a little bit to kind of just the overview of kind of the full plan and the sequencing as Bryce mentioned around Burtis House and section F and G here are probably some of the items that will be kind of a little bit later in the process. But as you heard from Scott, David, and Bryce, there were different portions of the overall conceptual design have a lot of similarities. So a lot of the areas have these kind of similarities that make it, we believe, kind of more efficient to deal with some of these areas kind of together as kind of part of a larger whole, but focus our attention into kind of a good way to break things up. And I think that's wanted to touch on that again before we close out here as maybe a little bit of a discussion point, and in addition to feedback on anything kind of in the plan itself, if there is any feedback on immediate feedback on what would make sense related to how we divide this and present the design and packages to the HPC and Planning Commission, we'd very much welcome any feedback that you have. So with that, I'd just like to thank you for the time and attention as kind of the virtual walkthrough of the City Dock plan.
All right, well, thanks everybody. It's a lot to digest. I'm interested, I think, in the eventual design quite a bit in terms of views at a pedestrian level. I think that's something that you will develop along the way, and it may influence how we break this up. I'm not sure, and I'd love to have a discussion right now of whether we have 3 separate applications or whether it's one application with 3 pieces. There's pros and cons I can see. From your design process, are you going to be designing A and B before in a level of detail that we could look at, and then design C and then design D and E? At a level of detail that we could look at, so we had perspective views and have an understanding of the height. The height is going to be the issue, I believe. So how do you envision your design process going?
Yeah, I think, Scott, David, and Bryce can chime in here as well. It's going to be a little bit of both, and by that I mean there's from a resiliency standpoint, there are kind of 2 things that's going to be driving the design. First is kind of like the baseline height. So you heard us refer to kind of the 5-foot level, and then the 8-foot level. Those need to be consistent throughout. But assuming those are kind of set and agreed, then the next phase would be, or getting into the detailed design will go much quicker in certain areas than others. So for example, between Donner Park and so A through B3 here is very much independent of a lot of the technical design engineering that's going to be required associated with the pump station and the pump station house. And then separately from, for example, the amount of interface and design work that's going to be required from between kind of Burtis House and the Harbormaster Building and some of the infrastructure and maintenance of traffic around Dock Street and the street improvements are going to kind of follow at a later date and be very much kind of separate and apart from the initial design around again Donner through the initial phases of or the early aspects of the promenade. So I think from our perspective, it would both from a timing and flexibility standpoint, it would be much simpler to have kind of independent submittals, recognizing that there has to be some connection of the whole across for the entire plan. But since the scopes within the project are so different and spread out in time, it would be very beneficial to be able to have different submittals.
Yes, so what I hear you saying is that there will be different submittals, which is fine, but perhaps some common design features would be presented in the first submittal, for instance, the flip up walls and where they are, the heights of certain things. So some of those might be carried, those design concepts might be carried into the second submittal after they've been more or less approved in the first one. Is that, I'm thinking of the flood wall in particular.
Yes,
Okay.
that'd be correct. Yeah.
And then any built structures from, and I'll just speak for the HPC a little bit. In the first submittal, there's a pergola down there. That design would be important. In the second submittal, the pump station design would be important, the exteriors and then in the third submittal, maybe all of the shading structures would be handled. And that's from the HPC point of view. We're going to be looking at exterior construction and anything above ground and all of the treatments of materials. So those will be important for us. I see Alex. Alex, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question that related to what the thought of the minimum capability would be. So, these things are always have to be done in phases, and the funding takes time to work out. But what would be sort of the minimum operational capability, that would have to be done to make this even, to even start? Is it just the walls A, B around to D without actually the park? Can you guys comment on that, of like how much of what's the minimum you'd have to do to even start this,
Right.
realizing that you might not be able to do it all at the same time?
Yeah, I think the way that we're proposing to approach it is that the minimum would be effectively the entire area, but more how far do you go within that? So is there an ability to then add on the the transparent flood walls or flip up flood barriers at a later date? So for the city dock area to get the protection that it needs, you need a consistent, effectively can just trace on a map from gate 0 all the way down to 110 compromise and across at a 5-foot elevation. You need that elevation to provide the protection, but that you also require the storm drain improvements and pump station improvements. So that's the minimal scope, but it doesn't.
I'm real quick. That's the level of the existing bulkhead, the concrete bulkhead that was put in.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the minimal kind of scope and infrastructure that you need to kind of provide protection kind of now and for the foreseeable future. And then there's the question of how to design so that either as part of the same project or quite easily at a later date, you can provide additional protection up to the planning horizon, which we've set as 2050, which is that 8-foot level. So
Yeah, I guess what I more what I was getting at is like how much of that area D would have to be done along with the, you know, the basic flood mitigation pieces along the water. I mean, so as an example, could you do all of the flood mitigation pieces without, you know, sort of doing that whole raised grassy area kind of thing?
in
You know,
theory, you could, but it then candidly would be a pretty far step from the base consensus plan. Is there a way that you technically could build just the wall on the front without the park? Absolutely, but it wouldn't make much sense from a cost standpoint and efficiency standpoint.
yeah, I understood. I'm just just more curious, like if you know the money didn't all show up enough to do everything, you know, in the first go around. That's sort of what I was getting at. But I think you've answered my question well enough. But thanks.
Okay, any other commissioners, either planning or HPC commissioners, have any clarifying questions here?
Well, at the risk of, I don't know, causing heart attacks, starting with Eileen Fogarty and probably going to Bryce and everybody else, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. And I'm also going to take a little responsibility for maybe not having asked them well many months ago. As I look at this, what I see here is on Dock Street in front of what may become a hotel. We don't know, but it's certainly prime real estate. I see a tremendous amount of asphalt and a lot of parking, and I see the great capacity for a fantastic pedestrian space that could enlarge that flex space in D, make it much more useful for all kinds of purposes. But what it would require is that basically there be no automobile traffic. Now, certainly if it's hardscaped, it could be accessible for the boat shows, their equipment. It could be accessible for whatever else is needed to be done. But what I'm proposing, and this is maybe not in your scope, Bryce, but maybe it should have been in your scope. What I'm going to be proposing is that any new structure or any new use that's proposed for that, the Dock Street building, that the vehicular access to it be on Prince George Street. And that the whole front of it be virtually pedestrianized. If I had a restaurant on the first floor of that building and I was able to sprawl all out into a beautiful brick mall, I think it would be unbelievably fantastic. There'd be all kinds of opportunities for public use down towards your proposed Harbormaster Building, and work well with whatever plans you have for the Burtis house. But the key to it is using Prince George Street for all cars. And we're already allowing cars halfway into this very valuable space. And I notice on one of these slides, there are even the buses that arrive here, which are not built for an historic downtown and really clog things up and are completely inappropriate, but they turn on Craig Street. But I'm concerned that buses will even turn onto what you've proposed here for Dock Street. But in any case, if the vehicular access and all cars, had to drop off hotel users or restaurant people on Prince George Street, and there was a turnaround at the end, what you'd start doing is enlivening Prince George Street in the 2 blocks up towards, Randall Street that goes across. And I don't know that this was in the scope of the City Dock Action Committee, but it should have been, because what it does is it by that movement alone, you will create an incredible incredibly beautiful public space that will be valuable and usable in all kinds of different ways. You could either enlarge the green space or not, probably not. You probably leave it hardscape, which is fine, but it would be usable for all sorts of purposes. It would draw people down towards the water. It would draw people down towards the Burtis house. It would make a destination along with Campbell Park and with the green space that would be just, unbelievably. But that's what you would have to do. You'd have to say there will be no car access, on Dock Street, and anything that's built there has to have vehicular access on Prince George. That's just the first one. That's just the first heart attack that I'm proposing. The second heart attack I'm proposing is, I don't know, really mean to revisit it all here tonight because, there was a consensus plan, as you said, but it has to do with that silly traffic circle that's down there. And I noticed that in the documents that you provided to us a week or so ago, that you had some sketches for Market Plaza. By the way, can we change it from Market Space to something more human like Market Plaza or Market Square? But you had some sketches for what you could do down there. And in every case, you can't do anything in front of the Market House because all of that space is taken up because of that traffic circle. And one of the things that, I was on the earliest city dock committee, I don't know, 5-7 years ago. And we spent a lot of time with traffic engineers and came to the conclusion that traffic would flow just as beautifully through a signalized intersection as they do through that traffic circle. And if you did that, you would have all kinds of room on B1 and B2 and doing everything that you need to do around that whole part of the city dock area, which is really organically a part of what you're looking at here. And you can't look at it aside. But let's put that aside for now because we're not focusing on that. That's my concern about Dock Street. On Donner Park, you mentioned in very small type that on the east side of it, that there could be restaurant seating. Is that intended to be a part of the 110 Compromise Street building? Is it, you'll have to inform us a little more as to whether that's public space or public space devoted to private use, or whether we're going to gain that space or what. That's question number one. Question number two is, let's move to Campbell Park. Is there any possibility to do sort of flexible seating down there rather than so much fixed seating? I noticed in New York that there's several of the small parks have tables and chairs that are movable and that people move around, and there'll be 2 people at a table, the next table there'll be 6. I don't know if that, if that's a possibility, or if you feel like fixed seating is a necessity in a public space. But I think that would be, and that's a level of detail that we really don't need to get at today, but you're asking for feedback. The other thing about Campbell Park is the mayor's proposed a ferry shuttle from someplace in this area over towards 5th Street. And I wonder if you're not, make a note to consider where that might be. And where, well, I think that would be enough.
Bob, that's from the long dock at Burtis. That's what the proposal is. It's the dock that's coming over from Burtis.
Well, that's all the more reason to use Prince George Street as a very much more important access to the water. I mean, it could be a really great street because it does end at the water. You could use that as where shuttles could come and pick up people from that little ferry. You could use it for, like I said, hotel drop off and pickup. And it would start to enliven the next block up. And because it's a street now which is not being used, and it could be used, and you could still have parking along the one side, along the nave of the academy side. Anyway, okay. So that's where the ferry is considered to go. But once again, all of this needs to work and Bryce, you really, guys, your team has really done an amazing job of pulling together all of the different interests that are focused in on this very valuable property. And I want to congratulate you for really doing such an elegant job at this point. And don't take my suggestions as any kind of criticism. Take it as, I want to add to it. I don't want to subtract to it. I don't want to divert it from its, from not only starting, but from completion. I just say, look at Prince George Street and look at getting rid of that traffic circle. And this thing could really reach international stature.
So Bob, if I could just comment, and I'm not having a heart attack over here. The traffic circle is not going to be addressed until the bricking of Main Street, but all the other issues you've brought up, there's been discussion and there's certainly opportunity for a lot more discussion on all of those issues. And part of why it's going to be so important over the next several months to hear from the community, the City Dock Action Committee, all the interest, is that it's this level of detail that we did not drill down into on the City Dock Action Plan.
Right.
We brought it to a level and then we said, okay, you have different interests, you have competing interests, you have some people who felt, or many people who felt that you couldn't lose any parking. Well, now the garage is larger than we thought. So there are a lot of moving parts and now we're at the point to drill down.
Well, okay. But Dock Street is, first of all, I think you guys, the way you've divided it, it certainly makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And I think that the questions that people have asked is what, about the application and so forth, you'll work that out. I just look at this thing and the Dock Street just stares me in the face. Just stares me in the face and says, wait a minute. We're repeating the same mistake that was made for the last 50 years, which is to put parking on the most valuable piece of real estate between here and Philadelphia.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, would you like for us to speak further about this, or are there others who?
In terms of the scope of work, it would be helpful to say whether the Dock Street is in the AMRP scope. That would be helpful, I think. And Alex has his hand up as well. Alex, do you want to make a point there? And then we can go back to talk about the scope here and why the lines are drawn like this. For instance, Burtis House is out of scope right now. But Alex, do you have a point?
Sure. I just wanted to dovetail a little bit in with what Bob said about Dock Street and Prince George in Prince George Street. And you guys asked for a little bit of feedback about where the Burtis House is and, just the basic sketch you had there. The part of that area where the Burtis House is now that always strikes me as very odd is that it doesn't flow. Every time I'm down there, I don't really know what that space is. Is it private space? Is it public space? It's kind of chopped up. It's not inviting. It's not really connected to Dock Street or Prince George Street. So I think, with respect to what Bob said about how Prince George Street could function better, would be really important to work, a better flow around whatever that, it's latitude 38 now, but who knows what it'll be in the future. And just to make that flow in a much nicer way. And I think, Bob was getting to some of the reasons that it doesn't flow.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. Yeah, I think what's surfacing, and Diane, I'll get to you next. What's surfacing in my mind is we are talking about planning type questions here, which is appropriate that Bob and Alex and Diane comment about planning type issues. Whereas what the HPC folks we're going to be more looking at the physical built structure and its guidelines. So we'll need more detail about what the pump station looks like, what the Harbormaster Building looks like. So right now, these are conversations that I think are really appropriate for the Planning Commission to chime in on. So that's my thought, at least right now. Diane?
Oh, yeah, thanks. I'd like to thank Bryce Turner for mentioning how important it will be to have boater amenities. I know, again, it's out of scope, but I'm glad you're thinking about it. I know it was raised. a while back in some of the original meetings. So it's super important that that's part of the plan. And I also agree with what Bob and Alex were saying about activating Prince George Street. And it's really in keeping with the history of Annapolis. I understand that was one of the major streets from which shipping took place. People dropped
Ferry.
off, picked up.
That's where that was the ferry terminal.
Yeah, I mean, we should use it, and it should be, part of this plan in a major way. And I also agree that in front of what is now latitude 38, the Dock Street section should not be parking. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. We've said it so many times. When it shows up as parking still, I'm a little shocked. So those are my comments. But so far, so good. Everything, the way you're approaching this makes sense, and yeah, I'm thrilled to see this moving forward. Thanks.
Okay, that being said, Bryce, maybe you could follow up. Is the Dock Street section there in the scope of AMRP as to what you'll be presenting or not? And if not, how does that work?
Yeah, I'll just mention a couple of things. First of all, all of you that have raised these issues about Dock Street, I think we're kindred spirits about that. Anything to improve the walkability of the area, the attractiveness, the softer materials is a great goal to have. There's no question about that. We are juggling and balancing a number of different opinions, obviously, and stakeholder input that is making that very challenging, including bus drop-off, parking, building access, etc. And I'll just mention a couple of things, and then I'll let Ivan actually address whether or not it's in our scope or not. I personally would love to see it bricked. I think Dock Street maybe could be bricked. Certainly nice material pavers one way or the other, where the letter G is there, as well as Dock Street closer to the park. I think that'd be fantastic, possibly making that truly a WUNRF, where you may have bollards that automatically go down when a delivery truck or emergency vehicle has to access it, or a property owner. I think that the Harbormaster Building and the boater facilities could help fill in that gap, if you will, and actually make a better walkable connection to the park. And I think that would be fantastic. Similar to what was shown in the sketch plan. One of the challenges we have with Prince George's Street is that residents don't always feel that that street should have more activity. So that is one of the other things that has to be balanced there. But all in all, I personally would like very much to see that happen. I think the more we can calm the traffic in that upper part of Dock Street, I think all the better. I don't see why Prince George's Street can't be used as well further. So those are things that we need to address and to figure out. But those are the things that we're trying to balance right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to add to what Bryce mentioned. So what you see in kind of G or through Dock Street, yes, that is kind of within the scope. We've as part of our proposal that the pre-development agreement is based on kind of has its foundation very much in the consensus plan. But as part of the work that we have been doing and will be doing throughout the years, look at how we update and incorporate design feedback as we move forward. And there are going to be some competing demands as we look at this area of the city, and what we're hoping to do is balance that in the best way possible. So we've incorporated into the design and location of the ramps, incorporated some of the needs for an entity like the boat show, and we'll continue to look at how the area can function for an event space. Similarly, there is going to be a need for both access requirements for at least emergency vehicles, if not also buses, and how those can move around this area will be part of the scope. Similarly, the Harbormaster function and the Harbormaster Building is part of our original scope, but as was pointed out by the Burtis House study, there is some possibility to kind of combine potentially some of the programming with what is at least initially now planned for the Burtis House. So that's one of the reasons why we in the feasibility initial kind of conceptual design haven't moved that Harbormaster Building forward while it is in scope, because there are other things that we need to coordinate with. Similarly, also, there'll be a coordination effort here from a planning perspective, as well as what the Naval Academy is looking to do when it comes to their resiliency and flood mitigation project. So there are going to be a lot of moving pieces and things that probably will get updated as we move forward.
Yeah. So that sounds like you're saying it is in scope, but you don't have a proposal for it at this time to present, but you would take input from a planning point of view, like you're getting tonight, to possibly present alternative plans for Dock Street. Is that a reasonable summary?
Yes, I believe that's the case. Recognizing the fact that there's current property owners in need of vehicular access there, so there might be some of that goes into a policy decision that the city has to make. But from a design perspective, we're definitely interested in feedback.
So as far as we're concerned right tonight, G, H, and I, if on your list here, I is looks like the Harbormaster Building, might be a phase 2 kind of from your scope point of view, but from a planning point of view, they can't be separated. I'm hearing people say, so that's going to be a challenge for you in the next few months, I would say, from what we're hearing tonight. It'll be more of a planning thing from my point of view, our point of view. I think it's more of a planning issue than a HPC issue right now. Materials and things like that will be HPC, but planning would be most involved. Alex, did you still have your hand up, or do you have something more there? Okay, Bobby.
No, sorry, just didn't take it down.
That's fine. Bobby, you have a comment?
I do actually have a question. Jumping across Eagle Alley to look at the area labeled H. It says it's future flood protection expansion. HPC has already reviewed, and I'm guessing the planning commission has as well, the plans and designs for the pumping station across Compromise Street. And I'm curious how that might fit into this plan, because from what I'm seeing, if we've already got the other pumping station plans in place and hopefully a timeline going forward, might it not make sense to do that H portion of the wall at the same time, so that you get the full protection as far down Eagle Alley towards the bay as you can, and you don't just have a space where water's going to continue to come up and end up on Compromise Street?
Yeah, I can answer that. So yes, it would make sense. And most of that is private property along there, H. So we're going to talk to those private property owners to see if they're interested in joining this project. There would be great economies of scale for them to join this project instead of them having to do this themselves. It's also very advantageous for them to be outside the bathtub instead of inside the bathtub, which is where they're going to end up if they're not careful. So we're going to have discussions with them. The Compromise Street flood mitigation is going to go ahead. We've talked to AMRP a little bit about doing that and getting some pricing. So we're considering that, but that project will still continue because we still need to deal with the flooding of Compromise Street. And that other project will do that. This project deals with the storm drain flooding on Dock Street. The other project deals with it on Compromise Street.
And again, the design standards perhaps that we come upon for A and B and will be used, I guess, I would hope, on H. In terms of the heights and the materials, that type of thing. Is that
That's
a good
right,
assumption?
Tim. It would all be coordinated. So it would be coordinated with the rest of the work that's being done.
Yeah.
And, you know, most of H, where the letter is there, you know, is actually city property, right? The garage, it's really beyond there with the Fleet Reserve building. That is private property, is my understanding. But really, everything within the scope from A to I think it's more about sequencing than it is about phasing. And what I mean by that is, you know, in order for the system to work, it really has to all be done. There are some things that could be phased, possibly, you know, such as the fountain or, you know, some portion of the parks or shade structures. But really, for the system to work, it's got to all be put in place.
Yeah, obviously water is going to find a way around if you don't do that. Right, I think that's what you're saying. The flood mitigation or the flood protection is the most important. So I think what perhaps the takeaway is that getting those details about from point A all the way around to point I, what the actual sections and elevations look like, that would be the first thing I think that we could find reviewable. What's the in terms of that, the pump station and its role, is it for the plan to work? Is it more than just keeping water out? It's getting stormwater out as well. So that's the main role, I think, of the pump station, or one of the roles. Is the pump station kind of a given in the first sequence?
Yeah, it's arguably the most important piece here is storm drain and pump station first.
So details of that structure, you showed us a plan there, and I think you've got some reviewable content there that could come as soon as that would be a pre-application for just the pump station structure. It's going to have a view shed impact. The demolition of the Harbormaster Building is a given, I assume.
Yes.
So that starts becoming reviewable as well, and as well as the pergola over on A. And we'll work with you in terms of, you know, pre-application meetings. So, Diane, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to double check with David. I know in previous renditions of this city dock master plan, the flood mitigation went all the way up through Newman Street coming from City Dock. So it stops at Fleet Reserve or right up at Newman Street. And in this version that I'm looking at right now, it looks like it stops, you know, at A, and then H says, you know, future flood protection. I think the money we're getting, this is all premised on that wall being able to extend out at least to Newman Street. Has that changed?
No, the issue, Diane, is that section of H, the only city-owned part of that is the end of Newman Street. So that's the white area on the right. So you have 110 Compromise,
right,
privately owned. You have that parking lot that's privately owned. A part of that's the city's, but the part next to water is owned by 110 Compromise. Then you have Newman Street, which is ours, and we're going to address that as part of the Compromise Street flood mitigation, not up to 5 feet, but up to 4.2.
right.
And then you pick up the Fleet Reserve, and the rest of it is all privately owned, because then you have
right.
the Annapolis.
So how
So we need to work with them to bring them in on this project, and they're very interested in this, and we think that we'll be successful, but we can't pay to do those improvements to private property.
No, I understand, but so it's been over a year. So how are discussions going with those entities? Since that's
good. I mean, they're all interested. We need some pricing that we can present to them. We need some more detailed information. We're just getting to that now for the dock, or for the city dock design. We've been focused on the garage, but they are all very interested.
okay, great, because it does seem kind of futile if we're going to leave out half of the major flood mitigation, but okay, thanks for that update. Appreciate it.
So 110 compromise owns the water access on the existing boardwalk, if I understand what you're saying, David.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, things have certainly come a long way. And the sophistication of this team is amazing. David Gerald, I want to thank you for all of your keeping it sort of flowing.
Some balls.
And
Yeah.
Eileen from the other side, it's very impressive. I only have one comment in passing or in departure. I remember when a fellow in the very first committee, Anthony, whose name I can't remember, last name I can't remember, one of the owners of Galway Bay was on the first committee.
Anthony Clark.
Yeah. Gotcha. Thank you. Said that the success of the whole city dock scheme is going to be whether it's a 3-generation park for little kids and parents and grandparents. And so Anthony Clark was right about nearly everything he said, if not everything. So to that end, I'm going to ask the landscape architect to maybe put a Post-it note on his notebook and wonder where we might put a playground and whether that playground can be removable for boat show purposes or whether it needs to be permanent. But wouldn't a playground with some benches around it, wouldn't that be cool? Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, I think we're kind of wrapping up here, but I think we started providing you some feedback. Thank you for showing us these plans. I think in the next iteration, I think the biggest design challenge is what this, especially I believe on the Compromise Street side and the Dock Street side, from a pedestrian point of view, there's clearly going to be a height. And there's no way around that. I believe one of the sections showed along Compromise Street a person walking next to a wall. How do we break that wall? How do we understand what the design of that wall looks like? It looks to me like it's shoulder height. And to me, that's what one thing from a mass point of view that jumped out at me on the Compromise and Ego Alley sides. So that would, more information about that look and feel is going to be real important to know that you've designed it, understanding that you want to mitigate that as much as it's going to have design constraints. I understand, but more detail there in the next pass would be great. And if the pump station is number one on your list from a structure point of view, what's it going to look like?
Another thing real quick, Tim, that we haven't talked about, and that's Gate 0. The Navy, as you can imagine, is very interested in coordinating what that area, because there's going to be a transition there between between what they're doing for flood mitigation and what we're doing. So that's another coordination point that is going to be very, very important to the success of this.
Yeah. Yes, completely. It could be a huge hole in the dike, right? If we don't connect the two.
Literally.
And are you already in discussion with facilities at the Naval Academy? I imagine that's at a higher level. It's probably not even at the Naval Academy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're talking to them. Again, we haven't really progressed the design a lot yet, but now's the time, and they're chomping at the bit to get started with those discussions.
Great. I also would expect in the next few months, actually, that we're going to see the mothballing of the Burtis house as a HPC and maybe Planning Commission hearing and a certificate of approval. I do expect that in the next 6 months, because that mothballing has been designed and funded. So I expect, I don't know who, David, maybe you can help us. Who's going to present that? Does the city own it yet?
The city does not own it, but we're really close to owning it. It's supposed to go to the Board of Public Works for last minute or the last final signatures, and then we'll have a closing. So probably within a month we'll own it, and the city will have to be at least part of that. So we'll see.
Yeah. So the city would present this. Or Public Works will present the certificate of approval request.
Yeah, Preservation Maryland's actually going to do that project, so they'll probably be our project lead to present that, but we'll be involved.
You'll be the owner at that point. Okay. All right.
Good job.
Good. Yeah, finally, right?
God.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This has been, this is exactly what we'd hoped would happen. I get a good view of some detail here, and I know you're going to be working again for the next few months, and we're happy to host the joint meeting again, or just to streamline a little bit so you don't have to present twice. I'm happy to do that. Maybe the Planning Commission is as well. So if it works.
Yeah, for me, I think these joint meetings are good because it allows some cross-pollination in the
Agreed.
the two different thought processes that often have some overlap, and it's good to
completely
to do that together.
All right.
But thank you guys. Yeah, this looks really
Thank
great.
We appreciate
Forward
it
to
too.
more.
Look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And patiently waiting. Actually, Ellie, do you have any comments, parting shots briefly?
No, Tim, thank you. This is your show. And actually, one of my concerns really is what goes on underground. I'm focused on the function versus the form. So I don't want to interrupt this conversation. But
all right,
thank
very
you.
good.
I think this is a great idea.
Okay.
The joint meeting.
Super.
Thank
More
you
of
for
them,
having
more
me.
of them, the better. All right. Okay. Thanks very much. It's about 8:50 right now. We do have a bit more business to conduct. One patiently waiting out there has, if you could promote Madeline, whoever was here. There we go. We have a pre-application on Southgate to take a look at, and then we have some other business to conduct. You're welcome to stay anyone's welcome to stay.
Well, Tim would love to stay, but we have a planning commission meeting Thursday night, which is going to last.
No, plenty enough. Yeah.
So I'm gonna say goodbye.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, same here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right. All right. I'm sorry. In the public, in the purple cherry room, I forgot your name.
Doug Kopta.
It's Doug.
Doug. All right.
No
So
worries.
good. Thanks. This is a pre-application, and it's a courtesy extended to applicants, future applicants, to obtain design review and comment from us. And nothing we say in this particular discussion should be construed as approval or disapproval. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
And concur. Okay, great. Thanks. Tell us what you'd like to know about your project. It's two pieces, right? So
It is. It consists of what is the existing garage and then the main house. So ideally, we present those generally separate. Obviously, they're on the same lot. I believe the garage is pretty straightforward. Hopefully, that proceeds a little bit faster than the main house, but I understand the main house will consist a little bit more. So therefore, we understand that might take additional reviews or discussions.
Okay, great.
If I can share
just
my
real
screen.
quick, it looks like Matt McLaughlin and Carrie McLaughlin are here
That is
as
correct.
well. They're the owners, I assume.
Those are the owners.
Yes, we are.
Okay,
Right,
great.
thank you.
Good. I just
Usually waiting as well.
Very good. Yeah, thanks. That was a
Hopefully this is a
lot.
little bit easier than the Dock Street presentation.
Well, it's a little more finite.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everybody.
Okay. Tell us what you want to know, and then we'll go around and have a discussion, a
All
conversation.
right. So we're going to go ahead and start with the garage. The garage is pretty straightforward. It's an existing historic structure. This is what is currently a perspective of what we are proposing. Significantly, generally with the garage, it is in need of much repair. Obviously, Matt and Carrie would wish to try to keep the existing style and the material as much as possible. They love the historic charm and the aspects of it. The one probably most significant item is, and I'm going to scroll all the way down to what is existing photo. It appears at some point after the garage was built, there was an existing set of stairs that are structurally deficient on the exterior of the building that we are wishing to remove. Otherwise, on terms of the exterior renovation, significantly, the primary work that we're proposing is converting what was one large garage door to a separate garage door, as well as a single door, and introduce the stairs inside of the building. That will alter what are the side windows. So obviously we'll be removing what is an existing door that is, I hate to say, basically falling apart. So we'll be replacing the existing door and reconfiguring some of the windows. I'd probably say what is the most significant aspect in terms of the HPC's concern would be is we would like to propose to replace the windows to Marvin single hung windows. The majority of the windows are either falling apart, significantly rotten, damaged. And I think our largest concern is we feel through the repair process, and I'm sure John will have additional comments and feedback as he's visited the project twice with us, is just that by the time we repair them, we're not really left with what is much of the historic window itself. Other than that, we're proposing to keep the existing exterior shingle, the slate roofing, as well as the brick siding. We're proposing that we're going to have some sort of finish on the exterior brick. We haven't exactly identified what that is. We're thinking possibly a lime wash that I believe we discussed with John as well. And he felt we generally would be supported. So Tim, let me ask you this. Does it make sense to cover this and then have discussion and jump to the main house, or jump to the main house and then we can discuss both topics?
I think it kind of makes sense to go ahead and talk about the garage separately. I think
Okay.
similar topics are going to come up, but from a clarification, we could ask some clarifying questions.
Sure. And I'm just going to leave here, so it's...
The footprint of the building doesn't change, or it does change?
Footprint does not change.
Okay. And do you understand when the building was constructed?
I believe, I'm not 100% certain. I believe it was Matt and Carrie, maybe you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was early 1920s or 30s, along with the main house.
Yeah, I think the main house was 1915. I don't know that we have anything in particular that does the garage, but assuming it's the same time.
And it actually, it's retained its form. So it's in pretty good shape from a form point of view, and therefore would be considered a contributing structure. And the reason I mentioned that, therefore, we are going to need to be strict in our review when we're applying our guidelines. It appears to be in relatively intact shape, even though the windows are failing, but the structure is there, the features are there, and therefore we would be applying a strict standard of review.
Structurally, the structure is actually in very deficient shape. We've had a structural analysis, and we've had a lot of conversation with both Matt and Carrie that while they would wish to keep it, they love the character, they love the charm.
Sure.
There is quite a work to be done in terms of the actual structural itself.
Interior work, the interior structure.
The actual structure itself.
Yeah, as you know, we don't necessarily, obviously it's very important that structure take place, but you don't want it to fall down in the process of your renovation, obviously.
Correct.
So if we go, if we just maybe go around and other commissioners jump in, clarifying questions in terms of the changes to the facade from the current, each facade. I understand the removal of the stairway.
That's correct.
And the relocation of windows. There's a lot of relocation of windows.
Significantly, no. We are keeping all existing windows intact. The only removal essentially would be the existing door at the top of the stairs. We would be filling.
All right, I missed that. So you're converting one door to a window.
Correct.
Okay.
And that would be like right in this space right here. That would be removing the door.
Oh, and it just stays as a blank space. It doesn't.
Correct.
Okay, so you're infilling there.
Yeah.
And then all the other openings stay as they are now.
That would be correct. I do believe there is one window along, if you can see my cursor here, that is sitting roughly at grade that we would propose infilling.
Okay.
And I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to jump back to this. Yeah, you can't see it here. It's hiding behind ivy and brush. Other than that, everything, all the fenestration would remain as is, though we would again, request that we would be able to replace the actual windows itself.
All right. And then the upstairs above the garage door there, there's a triangular window there that probably was added at a later date, but.
This window, we would work with somebody as much as possible to repair. This is the only window necessary other than the main garage door that is visible from the streetscape. We do recognize that obviously there's a general level of view to this structure from the water, though very minimal, but we would try to keep this intact and repair and rebuild as necessary. This seems to be in a little bit better condition than the other windows and doors. All the other windows and doors are in extremely poor condition.
So as we're looking at this drawing here, we're seeing the garage doors converted from a single door to two, an entry door and a garage door.
That would be
a
correct.
Single garage.
Yeah. So here is.
Okay.
Yeah, here's probably a better view.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
the
Interesting.
door.
That door's got a lot of character. The age of the door would be helpful to know.
That we can certainly look into. I do not know off the top of my head.
If it's near the original, then we have a longer conversation about this conversion. That's my thought, at least.
I don't believe it's the original, but we would have to investigate that. Just based on the construction type in relationship to the other doors and windows on the structure.
Okay. All right. Other clarifying questions or comments from the other commissioners, please?
Are there any changes to the roof line at all?
No.
Okay.
Okay. All good. How about the railing there on the side in the back?
We are proposing to keep the existing railing, obviously repair patch as necessary just for safety requirements.
Great. Okay. Other commissioner questions, comments, thoughts? So the big issue then is actually, are the windows original and are they beyond repair? That is probably the biggest issue we have here. John Tower, what are your thoughts in general and then specifically on the windows?
Well, I'm not sure that Doug and I agree on what is beyond repair or in extremely poor condition. I think that for the garage, the windows are slightly more compromised than they are in the main house. However, I also think that the garage has a lot of interesting form. I think it's probably it was probably constructed in the 1920s because the Sanborn shows it as a single story auto house in the 1921 map. So I think there was an expansion after that. It's an unusual form, especially because it has 3 levels. And I'm thrilled with the fact that they want to work to save the form. I think that's great. And keep the slate roof, slate dormer. I think that it would need to be demonstrated that the windows are beyond repair. But otherwise, it's a shame to see the door change. But from the perspective of its impact on the streetscape, it has a minimal impact because it's set so far back from the street. But
and we're losing, yeah.
It's an actual it's an interesting door, and the other thing about this garage that's noteworthy is it's more symmetrical than the main house. And when you look at the main house, it's surprising. So that's just a clue for commissioners to look at what's been proposed, because I think there's been an attempt to with new design to create symmetry, or at least imply symmetry. And
we'll get to that.
Right. But this, aside from the windows, And I would trade window restoration for door removal on any day with this.
So this then we're looking the main guideline we're looking at is D16, which it says historic windows and doors shall be preserved in place unless justified, unless documentation that justifies replacement is provided. So what you're going to need to do when we have these complicated windows, we're going to need a survey. You may have done this in the past, but we're going to need a survey of the windows. There's a lot of them. It's time consuming, but that's the only way we can assess the application to figure out whether all of them need. Right now, you're asking for all of them except one, and that's probably not enough. That is not enough detail for us to consider the answer. So some of the windows may be able to be preserved, and others we need documentation they're beyond repair. So we'll need a window survey.
Well, so Tim, let me ask you this. I'm not a person that repairs or rebuilds windows, and I know John obviously has worked with several companies in the past and made recommendations. Is there something that we could proceed with? We could repair, rebuild what is necessary when we get a professional, an advisor or something? Is there some way we could go through with some sort of administrative process that even if we directly work with John, that if there are some windows that are beyond repair, that we can get that feedback, we can have that recommendation, and we can work on a case-by-case basis?
Let me try and rephrase. I think what you're asking is, could you have a conditional approval?
That would be correct.
That one of the conditions was that you try. I don't know the answer to that until we see kind of some more detail on how far the windows are. But John can certainly help you point you towards experts. He definitely has done this.
Sure.
But at a minimum, we're going to need more detail on the windows.
Got it.
Before any kind of approval, in my opinion. I don't know whether other commissioners agree or disagree, but we just need more detail. And you may find that some of them were replaced in the 40s when you dig into it, in which case you've got a lot more flexibility.
So, Doug, could I just add a note for you?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So the note for the removal of the stairs, which appear to be a sort of appendage added on, they can remove the stairs, but there is no internal staircase. So one of the reasons to have the door on the front, or maybe it won't be on the front, maybe it'll be on the side, but one of the reasons is for access, so that you can get inside. And Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're going to have an internal stair.
That would be correct. And we felt that introducing a single, I'm going to use the word man door, a single door adjacent to the carriage door would be to utilize the existing fenestration and to limit additional modification to the existing structure. If that kind of makes sense.
So the interior plan would reflect that, the interior usage would reflect that part of the garage is going to be taken up by a new stair.
That is correct.
Yeah, got it. And I believe my opinion is, at least that seems, removal of the exterior garage, a stair, and putting the stair indoors is feasible from a guideline, change point of view. It doesn't have an adverse impact on the overall structure. So I think if I could summarize this piece for commissioners, correct me, but the presentation of the garage on Southgate here, what was the number again?
9 Southgate.
9 Southgate. The garage design is feasible with additional documentation on individual windows, but a wholesale replacement would be dependent upon probable repair of some and replacement of others, depending on what you find in your research.
Understood.
Okay.
Do you feel that would be sufficient, that we could go to a formal application?
I think you're going to need in the formal application your window survey completed.
Correct. We would provide a formal survey for the windows, but for the formal application.
For the garage,
Correct.
If you scroll down, again, I love your perspectives all the time. They're really clever. But regular elevations are probably also important. Yeah, comparing, well, there's no real difference on this one. No, I'm sorry, I retract what I said. I think there's not much change to the form of this building. We're really talking about window replacement, aren't we?
Substantially correct. And then otherwise it would be.
And there, I can see the elevations there. Yeah, John, what do you think? Do you think there's enough detail here? John actually is he's our gatekeeper to tell us whether it's a complete application or not.
Certainly.
Except for the windows, and which I think, Doug, if you and I walked the job, we could take a look, and I could give you some of my insights, and then I could give you some people that you could call who specialize in the restoration, stabilization, and repair of windows.
Certainly.
Okay, and then that's right. And then the spec of the window, that if you are installing new windows, what the spec of that is, you may have it in this packet already.
We do have it in this package. Again,
okay, and they're true divided light, or are they? I didn't look.
They would be Marvin true divided light, single pane with an energy panel.
Perfect. Okay, and I think if I'm not mistaken, right now in our other in the way we're looking at this right now, this application and the house are one application. Are you intending to submit two applications or one?
So I believe our intention was, and as well as what we submitted, was two separate applications. I'm not. I believe they were lumped together, and I don't know if that changes anything.
Okay.
But ideally, they are separate because I feel like this is pretty straightforward. Pending the door.
I think you're right.
Condition. I think the main house is a little more substantial.
I think your instincts are correct. Okay.
It's like we've worked together enough.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the main house.
Okay. Let me go ahead and jump over. So the main house will consist of several different areas. We will start with the front. This is obviously a perspective from the street. There is an existing front enclosed portico that we've discussed with John several times. That appears that it was enclosed at some point. We are proposing to remove what was added at some point and extend essentially the front porch to the left and right while respecting the front form of the entry. We're not intending to replicate it. We're introducing a shed roof on the left and right side, and then extending and filling with a brick base below. As I proceed to the rear of the structure, we are proposing an addition, and I'm just going to go ahead and slide to the perspectives that are probably the easiest to read. I'm going to just keep going here. Bear with me. Here we go. So we are proposing I'm going to call it a 2.5 story. It's a basement level as the grade drops down. It's a new, basically a basement area, an enclosed porch with screen, a enclosed space above, and then generally speaking, what we'll say is a flat roof. We're trying to minimize the scale of the addition and the mass. We are proposing a small deck, and then we are proposing 2 additional flanking dormers. In the perspectives, they're pretty minimal. They're not even very visible. So we jump to the elevation. We're proposing 2 dormers left and right of the existing dormer. They are independent. We're trying to respect and not alter or modify the existing dormer. But we are proposing these primarily for the existing bedroom and a proposed bedroom for egress purposes. And in addition to the garage, we are requesting that we would be able to replace the windows on every facade except for the main street facade. Just the fact that they're simply in pretty poor condition.
Just in general, that you're going to need a window survey. And in general, the same comments are going to apply.
Understood.
Okay. Okay. Anything else you'd like to tell us?
I don't believe so. We're doing substantial renovation on the interior, but I understand that doesn't necessarily alter what the HPC reviews. We are proposing also a lime wash as well on this structure.
A lime wash on its existing brick?
On the existing masonry, that would be correct.
Okay. So on the, so I'll call the street side, the north side, you've got an addition. So that we'll have to talk about that as a topic. Nothing on the east-west other than window replacement?
We will be removing what appears to be an existing added staircase to the side of the structure. Let me see if I
bet it was apartments. I bet this building was apartments at one point.
That's correct. Unfortunately, if you can see this photo here, you can generally see it, though. It was clearly added after the fact for an apartment. So that will be removed.
Okay. And there's a door there that will be removed and infilled?
There's currently a door that will be replaced with a window.
Okay.
And that would be right here.
Again, documentation of the age of that door and when that was put in, you probably I bet that was, my bet was that that's falling in the 40s or 50s, and you probably have no issue there in terms of historic material.
Maybe Matt can correct me, but I feel like that would probably be even more recent than that.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's I think it's only in the last couple of decades that it was turned into an apartment.
Yeah. That was happened in the 50s in the neighborhood here. Okay, other commissioners clarifying questions before we talk about feasibility or? Crickets. Everyone's already exhausted.
Sounds like this is a win-win. Everybody approves it, right?
Silence is not approval.
No, we have a lot.
Silence is respect for the application and the applicant.
Yeah, well, we have a lot to talk about. We're just asking clarifying questions right now. Bobby?
Huh? No, I'm not.
Okay. I have a clarifying question. The roof cornice there with the rail, I can't tell. Is this a roof deck?
It is a roof deck.
The whole area?
That's correct. Okay. We're trying to minimize the scale of the addition and respect the existing structure and its scale and massing. So we proposed essentially a flat roof, and then we basically turned it into a roof deck. I feel like we've gone through an extent of design that minimizes the impression of any sort of roof deck. I understand that it's not necessarily desired in the guidelines. I feel like some of these perspectives are actually probably visible higher than you would see from standing on grade, as the grade tapers off quite a bit.
And that would entail changing a window into a door to provide access to the roof deck.
We would be converting an existing window on the dormer to a door, correct?
Right. And again, anytime we lose an existing window, we have an issue. Yeah, anytime we have to discuss those things. Okay. So let's step through. Let's step through the front portico first of all. Is an addition, and it doesn't run. Does it run the width? The drawings don't quite.
It doesn't run the full width.
Let me jump to an elevation. That might be easier to read.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that perspective, to tell you the truth. Okay, so it's asymmetrical, which is fine.
Correct.
Okay, it's off center.
The house itself is pretty asymmetrical.
Yeah, some interesting looking windows, especially on that upper dormer.
Yes.
So this would be considered a addition, and its size and massing of it. The commissioners, what do you think about it in terms of size, massing? Not over, obviously it's not going to overwhelm but I think it meets the standard of review in terms of massing.
How old did we say this building was? When did we say it was constructed?
1914, I heard.
I think maybe a little later, but it's possible between 1914 and 1921.
Okay, and we're not saying that this was there before and it's being brought back. This is a totally new element being introduced.
Good question.
It is. There is a porch there.
Right, yeah,
This is an expansion.
okay.
It's an expansion to the existing front porch. The current front porch, if I can jump to maybe an existing photo, appears that it was enclosed at some point, though does not appear to be original.
Okay,
So we are removing what appears to be added and then expand left and right.
okay.
So it's
Obviously,
tough.
we're respecting the existing pediment, the existing columns with the expansion.
Does it appear like that was tacked on at some point? Again, these are the things that you're gonna need to help us know, because if it was tacked on at some point, then and removing it is not an issue. But if it appears to be, it's funny, three French doors is the front door. That all.
The infill 100% feels like it was an alteration or an added aspect. The portico itself, I could not tell you whether it was original to the house or not. So I think through discussions with John that we felt that the portico could have been original. So we felt that removing what appears to be the enclosure of the existing portico and was respectful to the existing structure as well, then we are expanding left and right.
You're just expanding. Are you actually coming out as well? Are you actually encapsulating you are encapsulating or covering up or tearing off that portico, or that all the trim, the pediment and all that?
We would be leaving the entire front existing portico pediment and
Underneath?
adding on to it, correct?
So you'll see it as you step onto the porch, you'll see the previous pediment and all that.
That's correct.
Okay, okay. So
Obviously, we would sand it down, repaint it, fix up, repair as necessary.
I think that adds an awful lot of character to it. So I again, commissioners and John, feasibility on this particular aspect. What do you all think?
I think it's feasible.
Okay, under D6, which is size and massing of additions. Okay, so
I'd
that
kind
looks
of like to see what other houses on the street look like, see if this is, indicative of anything else that's on the street, just to kind of see how it's going to affect the streetscape.
Yep.
Was there any historical surveys with this property? Any old photos?
I've never seen any.
And we could not find anything of record.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
The irony is that this property is actually, I think, Matt, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is on the borderline of the historic district as well.
This is the edge, yes.
Yeah, this is the edge.
This Southgate.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
Good point, but it doesn't matter really.
No, yeah.
It is or it isn't.
Yeah.
The other thing too, it looks like you're not trying to create a false sense of history with your detailing here, keeping it simple, and the rail and the pediment looks simple. You wouldn't want to add dentils or make it look like it was old. And I think from this drawing, it looks like, what is the railing design there? Doesn't look very detailed in this drawing, so more detail there would be helpful.
We were simply proposed a very simple wrought iron railing.
It's wrought iron.
Certainly propose. I mean, we could provide either cut sheets or we could provide some sort of detailed breakdown as necessary. But we are trying to keep it very simple.
Yes, but it's wrought iron, not wood.
Correct.
It'd be great if you could find other wrought iron rail in the neighborhood.
Okay.
On the street. That would be, I bet you probably can.
Yeah.
On Southgate. Southgate is a real eclectic street.
Yes.
That's why everyone loves it, right? Okay, let's turn to the back of the house. And thoughts in terms of size and massing of additions, B6, I think we need to talk about. The concept of the dormers in D11, new dormers are actually strongly discouraged. It removes historic material, and there's a separate D11. It's a separate guideline, which prevents us really from considering that it's feasible.
Sure, understood. Our intent of adding the dormers is allowing an egress window for the existing bedroom as well as a proposed bedroom. So it was more about a life safety feature rather than really aesthetics.
Well, you'll need to make that case, but there's a challenge ahead of you there. The size and massing of this is, as there's two things, I'll just throw it out there. The size and massing is not, I don't believe it is subservient or subsidiary to the main mass of the building, especially in this drawing in the upper right. It's not set off as it's not, there's no reveal from the existing building, and it kind of overwhelms the existing structure.
So
and
Tim, I don't want to interrupt. The one item I would add is the challenge of these perspectives from our wonderful software that is so helpful is it tends to elongate or extrude. So,
I gotcha.
So, and one item I believe we're offsetting from the existing structure on this edge here, trying to obviously respect the existing building itself.
It's not persuasive, right? For me personally, I don't know about other commissioners. I'm not persuaded that it's set off enough. And perhaps if you go to the elevation, you're right. That might be a better. If you rotate around to the south, I guess, elevation.
Oh, bear with me.
Yeah. It's almost the width of the existing structure.
Yeah.
I think it might be a third less.
Yeah.
It's definitely smaller.
It is certainly, it is certainly less, but I understand it's substantial.
Yeah.
Will that be viewable from the water though? When from the water, it will have that. From below and looking up, it will have a very strong view.
What's the material difference?
Yes, and that's true. The answer to Kevin's question, real quick.
So the existing structure is all brick. We're proposing that the base would be brick, and then the upper portions would be a combination of wood clapboard and essentially wood paneling and trim.
Okay, but just to acknowledge Kevin's point, we have a guideline regarding views from the water. It's specifically this is definitely viewable from the water, and that the scale of this from the water would be a pretty big change in terms of it should be respecting the view there, and I think this is just a very large addition.
So Doug, you're going to have to present this with water views. You're going to have to include that in your package. And I don't think you have any perspectives from the water in it now.
No, I jump back to this one because this is probably the most applicable from the rear. However, from the water, you're going to be about 20 feet lower, clearly.
Making it even look bigger.
The reality is, as much as I would love to convince you otherwise, the addition is substantially the width of the structure minus 1.5 feet.
Well, okay, I'm not persuaded. So it is a lot going on. Okay, so right now you're gonna, I guess if you go back to the elevation, you're right. This is not the drawing to show that, to prove that to us, to me. So you're saying, looking at the other, I understand that you've offset halfway on. So this side, you are definitely smaller than the mass of the building. It's the south elevation where I believe that the true mass of the addition is evident. How many square, for instance, another way to look at, this one right here in the lower right here. It's a large addition, and I believe it is not differentiated or it is not subservient to the main building. How many square feet is the addition, and compared to the square foot of the house? Again, those are facts that you can get us that will help us understand that it is not as big as I feel it is.
Certainly, I'm not going to lie, it is a substantial addition to the existing house. The existing footprint is generally small, but we are significantly smaller than what is the existing footprint or mass.
So, Doug, I'm looking at the plans. If I'm reading this correctly, and I certainly hope that I am, is it 22.6?
We're roughly about 22 feet by 38 and a half.
Okay. 22 by 38.
The addition is 22 by 38.
Yeah, and so the house, of course, is 38 wide, and I'll just
substantially what is on the first floor is a covered porch and a small mudroom.
Yeah,
and we have a portion that we're adding on to what is a living space.
Yeah. So the house is about 30. It's what 30. Is it 38?
30.
And it's 33 feet deep.
It's 33 feet. Correct.
30 feet. Okay.
Again, these are the things that you'll have to provide to the commission to factually say that. Okay.
Well, Tim, all the dimensions are here. So, I mean, we can highlight, we can cloud, you can let me know what makes it a little bit easier to read if that helps.
I guess what I'm saying, the onus is on you to convince the commission that this scale of this this addition is not overwhelming the building. So the onus is on you. We can't sit. I don't think we have time to sit in a meeting and do math calculations for it. I think you can do that. And it would be helpful to me, at least. I don't know about other commissioners, but to be persuaded that it is not as large as it appears in the drawing. Okay. So let's move on to the windows. There are, in the addition, a lot of window area. And again, we have a guideline that says window area cannot exceed 33% of a facade. Got a bit of a challenge here because you got some voids.
Sure.
But and you may have been in other meetings where the same topic has come up, and if you do the math, you need to calculate that for us and say this is less than 33. Right now, it appears to be quite a bit more than 33 on the south facade.
So would you like us to create a diagram that identifies that we are less than the 33%?
Yes.
That is the standard that we use. And other applicants have done it. I mean, it's not beyond the wit of man to do this. It's
certainly. Well, and this is our first pre-application. We're wanting to obviously get a feel and understanding and general acceptance.
Sure. Yeah, it's guideline D19, and you may have been you may have been in other, you've seen other applications where the applicant has been required to do that to prove it. It looks to me, and if indeed it is more, then you need to be working to reduce it. And again, you're going to have to penetrate underneath that void there, and that's all part of this facade. But my again, just instinctually, it looks more like 50% at least. So that would be problematic.
Yeah. And again, this is going to be where it would be really helpful to see how this house looks in comparison to the other houses on that water side as well, to see how it blends in with the surrounding buildings.
So are you wanting sorry, Bobby, are you requesting a collage or photos of the waterscape?
Right. Well, that whole street of pictures of each of the houses, so that we can kind of see what the streetscape looks like there.
And the waterscape as well. Now,
Yeah.
there may be some really ugly prior buildings that were put in place, but we need to evaluate this building with the guidelines that have been in place since 1995.
And then would we ignore the houses that do not fall within the historic district?
All the houses along this street fall in the historic district.
To the left.
You mean
area
Taney
back-
Avenue, Doug?
And left, it steps outside the historic district.
The historic district goes to Franklin.
I believe the house to our left, our adjacent neighbor, is not within the historic district.
They are.
That's not correct.
All the way
They
to
are.
the end of the street. All the way to the water.
Yeah.
All
What
the
is
way to
carved
the end
out?
of
What
Southgate.
was carved out are the modern townhouses across the street,
Yeah.
and of course the building that looks like a bank branch that's
Got
sitting on. I'm sorry, I judge you on that building. That's a long story about why that cul-de-sac got carved out, but it's true. Across the street on the water is not in the historic district, but Gil Cochran's house, or Gil Arminger's house, we reviewed that, which was next door. That's another story.
Understood. You have a lot of stories.
Okay, so the windows on all facades need to be below the 33% guideline. And again, for reference, that's guideline D19.
Understood.
Um,
All facades would remain existing short of the rear.
okay, then there's no issue. Okay, all right. The rear addition.
That would be correct.
Yeah, right. So on the east facade.
It would pertain to the addition elevation.
Correct. Okay. Okay. Good. Well, let's talk about the roof deck. That's going to be from my point of view. And again, other commissioners chime in. I understand that you're trying to break the mass down by putting a solid rail there. But we are strong. Roof decks are generally, especially of this scale, are not feasible.
Yeah. The words used are strongly discouraged, which means there has to be a compelling reason why it has to be there. So.
And that's D9. And
Yeah.
we have gone on record multiple times. They're highly visible and they interrupt the roofscape of the neighborhood. And that's the rationale behind that, the protection of overall character.
I think our biggest challenge is what we're attempting to do is to minimize the scale of the massing. And obviously, if we were to have a roof with a continuous pitch, would basically encapsulate what was the existing dormer. So we are attempting to avoid touching the existing dormer and respect that. And we felt that this was the least adverse effect to the existing dormer and the roof structure as well as mass.
There's nothing wrong with a flat roof. It's just that it couldn't be used as a deck.
Yeah.
As attractive as that might be, it is simply not one of the things it's not considered feasible.
It's not feasible, or it's not encouraged?
It's not feasible. It has been, we have gone on record, we have multiple applications in the last several years that this type of thing has not been approved.
If we were to find any sort of precedent of roof decks, I believe there's one down the street. Would that support our case?
Every application stands on its own with the commissioners that are in front of you. So if someone has done something that did not have a certificate of approval, that's one issue. If it was done before 1990, before these regulations were in place, it's not relevant, unfortunately. So every application stands on its own with this commissioner. Now, I'm only one commissioner, so other commissioners can chime in, but we are on record of saying that this is a feature that doesn't respect the neighborhood, and our whole guidelines are talking about respect for the neighborhood.
Is there anything about the actual design, rather than it being a functional roof deck, that is not accepted or approved?
That's, I can't answer. I mean, that's our job.
Sure.
It's not to evaluate the quality of your design, whether it's good or it's bad.
Sure.
It is to evaluate your design against what the guidelines are.
Sure. I think where I'm heading aesthetically is that, I mean, flat roofs, to be honest, are not that attractive. We're obviously trying to respect and keep the existing dormer maintained as much as possible in terms of the mass and respect that scale. So I think what our initial concept was, we're going to introduce a false parapet and a rail, and felt that at that point that we're doing that, it could be a roof deck. So if that could be a flat roof and it'd be a parapet wall per se, do you feel like that would be accepted?
I do, yeah. I mean, that's what I'm trying to tell you, that the parapet looks fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Other commissioners?
If I could speak to this, since I've been on the site, I really don't think the flat roof would be visible. I mean, you'd have to be a bird in the sky to see it. So it doesn't. The parapet wall isn't required for aesthetics. This is the way we're looking at it in the elevation. If you took the parapet wall away, it would still be barely visible. So that's just.
It's the challenge of a perspective view versus. But I do believe from a scale, again, if we're not here to comment on your quality of your design, but I do believe having a parapet there adds a feature in terms of a cornice, which we do talk about cornice sizes. It's a cornice effectively, and it is proportionally appropriate with the scale of it. So I wouldn't remove it.
Thank you, Tim. And Tim, and I think that's where my brain goes, is I'm really looking at it for an aesthetic in terms of a cornice capturing that space, rather than just using a flat roof, which.
Yeah, or a flat fascia and soffit. That wouldn't fit.
Correct.
Yeah. So no, that design. The problem is the usage of as a deck is not the feasibility. It's just not feasible.
So, Tim.
Yes.
Oh, this is Jackie. I think at some point soon we would want to see an analysis of how this complies with the bulk requirements for the R1 district, which would include, that very lower level. It can't be more than 50% out of the ground, or it becomes a story. You've probably already done the analysis for the bulk regulations, correct?
That would be correct.
And then the very top level cannot be more than 50% of the floor area of the level below it.
That the top level is substantially existing with the addition of the dormers for egress windows.
Well, just so we're clear that you're going to have to present us with an analysis of the bulk regulations.
Understood. So Jackie, you would like some sort of diagram that just clarifies that?
Yeah, you have to have a diagram and the computations, and sometimes with these houses where they slope down into the lot slopes down, the very lower level gets to be more than 50% out of the ground, in which case it's no longer considered a basement. It's probably not a problem here, but it's really hard to tell from these schematics, and I wouldn't want you to get too much further along without doing your bulk analysis.
Understood. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I know it's not an issue here, but we can certainly prepare some sort of diagram that
would be for your benefit.
Clarifies that.
Yep. Yeah, and for the benefit of the applicants, the owners, the requirements that Jackie has, all those need to be take place before it gets to our final approval. So those types of requirements have to take place in advance of our review.
Understood.
Okay. Okay, other commissioners? John Tower, any additional comments?
Looking forward to the site visit with you, Doug.
Yeah.
We can look at windows.
And we'll have the same comments about windows that we had on the garage. A survey is going to be needed. So let me try and summarize here. With respect to the main house here on I keep forgetting, 6 Southgate?
9.
9, thank you. With regard to application for the main structure, there are two components. The one component on the front of the house, which is the removal of an existing door, but retention of the parapet or the pediment trim, and addition of a porch appears to be compliant with D16. I'm sorry, B6. In terms of size and massing, it's consistent with the design of the building. It's simple in form and doesn't give a false sense of history. With regard to the rear addition, there are several components which require further review. A substantiation of the need for the additional 2 dormers would be required because under D11, new dormers in existing roof structures are not feasible. So that's a feasibility question on dormers. The scale of the overall structure, in addition, needs additional work to persuade the commission that it is subordinate to the main structure. From its size and its differentiation from the main structure, it just the subordination is not evident. The roof, the flat roof is feasible with the trim, but the use of it as a deck and the removal of an existing historic window is not feasible. Just going back to the scale of the building, it also has an issue in terms of guideline A3, which is views from the water, respecting the neighborhood view here. This is a new feature in the building, in the view shed from the water. And then finally, the amount of fenestration, the windows on the rear facade, I believe it's the south facade, appear to be greater than 33%. And if it's greater than 33%, it needs to be reduced in order to be feasible. So I think that the summarization is that this design needs considerable more work before it could be considered a feasible application.
Understood.
Okay.
Tim, can I add the lime washing of the brick?
Absolutely. Yeah, we need to take a look, and that would be across the whole building?
That would be correct.
Okay. Yep. There are some specific treatments that are needed, but in terms of color, that would be actually, Kevin, that would be considered feasible. As long as it's done in a way that doesn't damage the existing historic brick.
That would be correct, and that is why we chose to proceed, or we chose for a lime wash. We felt that was the simplest and probably the least abrasive application to the existing brick itself. And we could certainly coordinate any sort of repointing necessary. There are some minor areas, I believe John has noticed them, or we've discussed them, of areas that would need to be repointing, but we can coordinate that directly with John as well.
It's a tough issue. If this was the Peka house and they wanted to lime wash the Peka house, we probably would take a stand.
Understood.
Lime wash you do see it, I think, in other areas in the historic district. And remind me, the existing structure is brick and the addition is all wood and panel trim. Is that correct?
That's a combination of clapboard wood siding as well as trim. And the lower level of the addition would be masonry as well.
To match the existing, that would be lime wash, or would that be?
That would be lime wash as well.
Okay. Well, the differentiation is helpful there. That you differentiate the addition by making it clapboard and wood. So that's a positive.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, so we look forward to another discussion in a pre-application. I think that's your next step.
Got it. So do we feel like we could proceed with the garage separate from the main house, and the garage could proceed to a formal application?
I believe so, yes.
Does that take a vote, or is that a yes?
No, it doesn't require a vote. No, I think
Okay.
I think unless other commissioners feel like there's more detail needed on the garage. Anybody feel, or could we accept? We don't need a pre-app. We don't need another pre-app on the garage, I guess is what we're saying. If other commissioners agree with me. Okay. That's great. All right. Thanks. Look forward to another review.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time.
Hopefully we provided you with enough input.
You gave me a lot of input, and we will coordinate with Matt and Carrie and have further discussions, and we'll see you at the next pre-app.
Sounds good. Thanks. All right.
Thank you.
Oh, just remember that the window survey is going to be key to the feasibility as well.
Certainly. Understood.
All right. Thank you. All right. Commissioners, we're pushing time here a little bit. We have one thing we absolutely need to do tonight, and then I'd like to introduce the topic of the next item on the agenda, which is other business. We are required each year by code actually to elect officers.
Never mind. I was just going to ask the architect to stop sharing his screen, but he was ahead of me.
Thanks, Doug. So this is something we do each year for Leslie and Kevin's benefit. And if either of you would like to step up and be chairman, I'm happy to. We have to elect a chairman and a vice chair per code. And we do it on an annual basis. So tonight's the night we do that. And I will take nominations from the floor. I can't nominate myself. Bobby can't nominate herself to be vice, but or if
nominate you to be chair.
I will second that nomination.
Okay, and does anyone else want to run? Okay, seeing no motion in the chamber. All right, we are all in favor of?
Aye.
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 Opposed? I think I abstain. Okay. Okay. Anyone, please someone nominate Bobby to be vice chair.
I nominate Bobby Collins for chair, or whatever position she wants.
Vice chair.
Vice chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? Okay.
Can I
All
have
right.
a days?
Thanks for your confidence. So I appreciate it. That's taken care of. The next thing I sent out via email a draft of the furniture guidelines. You can see that they're considerably longer than our existing sidewalk cafe guidelines because we have a need to define beyond a sidewalk cafe. And I'm not sure if any of you had any additional thoughts, but you can see it's broken down into 7 or 8 different components. And I do want to probe a little bit for a few minutes tonight, and then you can think about this, and we will talk about it again in the January meeting. But I gave some background, and there's some minor changes throughout, tiny changes throughout. But then what I'm basically proposing is a major expansion of C12, which is called street furniture now. And so that's how I technically want to insert this. And the sections include, the first one is actually the density of the furniture and fixtures. Our current guideline does talk about this. It says consideration will be given to the number of placement and tables, the interplay between rhythm created by the furniture and the nearby streetscape. So we address this to a certain extent in the current guideline. I want to expand it a little bit to be a little more detailed, but I've proposed this broad definition as opposed to talking about specific ratios or dimensions. There's some code issues having to do with density of sidewalks, but or clearances and things like that. But again, I don't think we want to be too prescriptive here, because every single site throughout Main Street and on market space are different. And I'm afraid I tried to come up with ratios and densities. If we go with the allowed density, they can pave the whole. I mean, honestly, there's lots of the density that would be allowed is more than I think would not comply. So, Bill, did you have a question?
Yeah, there are prescriptive densities that would be required under the fire marshal.
Yes.
To allow egress, access, and various other items with that.
Yeah.
It may be denser than we want, but
exactly
that's the start.
Yes, and so I'd like to refer to those that comply with City Code Section 7.42.020, which does include those prescriptive things, in addition to some other things. But I mean, we can do more work on this. And again, I jumping around here a little bit, but with our first application of this with the market space, John is able to administratively approve those applications using these guidelines. So these have to be something that John can work with. But so my question to you as a group is, are we okay right now with having it relatively broadly defined, or do we need to do more homework to come up with something more prescriptive?
Question. Do we know if anybody else is considering changes in this area as we are? Do we know if planning and zoning or the fire marshal? I mean, given all that's happened in the last 2 years, could any of them potentially be changing their rules?
Bobby, I don't know if there are changes that are coming that are directly related to, or that they are developing. I actually think that the fire marshal and public works, to some degree, are waiting for us.
Okay.
Well, I think, John, I think the fire marshals, they do have minimum standards for access aisles and distance from things like fire hydrants I mean, there are certain things that are absolutely that aren't going to be changing, but are already in their rules with regard to there's even a distance that has to do with unobstructed sidewalk that Public Works looks at with sidewalk cafes. So I don't think any of that. I don't think the fire marshal's standards are going to change, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important for everyone to know that parklets are in our future. And although they don't necessarily mesh with the city dock plan that was presented to us tonight, one of the things that Bob Waldman talked about was moving the restaurant, whatever restaurant it would be, that currently occupies latitude 38 onto the street. So it's sort of on everyone's mind, but parklets are going to occur.
Yeah, and I'm trying to draft these guidelines to apply to those parklets as well. I think we want one set of guidelines that applies to outdoor furniture and fixtures, regardless whether it's a parklet or it's the city, or a sidewalk cafe or public space.
So then, Tim, do your draft guidelines, if it's a parklet, they include information on what kinds of barriers would be allowed between.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jackie, I didn't copy you. Yes, I've only talked about density right now. That's the first. Second has to do with furniture, tables and chairs. Third has to do with what I'm calling overhead shading devices, which is umbrellas and other things, barriers and railings, planters, lighting, heating devices, signs, and flooring. So yeah, all of that.
Well, perhaps at some point then, especially as these are going to apply to parklets, it might not be a bad idea to ask both the fire marshal's office and the public works to look at them to see if there are any red flags from the point of view of what they look at.
Okay, that's fine.
But
I doubt there are, but I don't have any problem. No, these are design guidelines.
right, but where you're proposing certain types of barriers to make sure that
Yes, will Public Works allow the removal of those heavy plastic jersey barriers and have them replaced with more
all right, yeah,
more
there's one
aesthetically pleasing planters?
That's
John,
one.
Actually, they're right now sourcing some that are more than 50 years old, so that they can be considered historic plastic barriers.
Good one. There is actually
Jackie got hurt.
That was when cars traveled 30 miles an hour up Main Street, not 50.
I think
well, I
they
do.
can find some in some place, maybe in DC.
Yeah. Well, I did actually, under barriers, I did insert something here, which I don't want to be coy about, but traffic protection barriers placed for protection shall be of a uniform color and may be decorated by business establishments.
Can we put any color but international orange?
Well, they're white also. White
They
was
come in
the
white.
improvement.
I could change the. I should at least I was going for uniform, but not. There's other issues about color that we say that it should not be. Can't remember the term that I use. Shall not be bright, overly bright. But I think, that's something that I don't want to be coy about. I'd like that to be in our guidelines, and whether we can get Public Works to agree is another issue. But we can certainly put it in our guidelines. But Jackie, I take your point that we're putting height that shouldn't exceed 3 feet.
I think that's good.
And they need to comply with all any other of the life safety code that is.
I think there's probably also a requirement that someone has a requirement about ADA accessibility to the outdoor dining area too.
Completely. Yep.
Yes.
That's in the planning and zoning section 7.42.020. So I refer to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you have all the bases covered.
Well, not sure about that, but
so Jim, I'd like to start giving specific materials and certain things as examples.
I agree. Yeah,
visual examples.
Right. So what I'm proposing is in section 2.1, for instance, for furniture, it says we already say they are to be constructed of wood or painted metal. We had in the current guidelines that they could be plastic if they could be verified to be ecologically friendly. Now, I don't know what that meant, but I reworded it: if constructed of recycled material and designed for outdoor use. Do we want to accept some plastic or vinyl if it is high quality?
No.
No plastic, please.
All right.
I would be no, John. That's look at that. It's got a recycle thing on it. I mean, that means you can recycle. It doesn't mean it is recycled.
All right. So John,
come on now.
John's saying let's go ahead and strike the plastic option.
I agree with John on other reasons, but I definitely agree with John.
Okay. How about upholstered chairs? I'm not sure. As long as the color isn't, I doubt people are going to do it in the first place. We don't see it occurring, but it was, some talk about it.
Removable cushions are permitted?
Yeah, removable are permitted, sure. You can do that. Instead of upholstered chairs, that's probably a better.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
signage provisions in there?
Pardon?
In your, is there a no signage?
Yes, a little bit later. Yeah, it's down there.
Okay.
Yep. Colors that relate to the property. No white or strikingly bright color furniture shall be installed.
Well,
So-
this is a real buzzkill, Tim.
I know. That's my job. Then John, to your point, examples of compatible chair and table designs are available at the Historic Preservation Office.
Which no one can find.
Well, I think you'll see this. I'm proposing
Intentional,
this.
John?
But hold on, Kim Consoli, strike that from the record.
Will do, sir.
So Tim, maybe we should have photos.
I think we need to provide, the onus is going to be on us to give John examples of what would be approvable. I think.
Is it more, should we give him some latitude in terms of approval, but give him examples of things that absolutely should not be approved, like orange jersey barriers?
I think both.
So John, what about resin?
That's plastic.
Resin, but I've seen some very nice, like resin pots, like planters and things
Oh, I
like
see what you're
that.
saying.
Yeah.
I would say no. Natural materials, wood, terracotta, metal.
Okay.
Ceramic.
Okay.
But I think
Yes.
I think most planters are going to end up being wood and possibly even on wheels.
Well,
Right, jumping down.
The only difference with resin is that that you don't have that expand and contract possibility that you have with terracotta or with materials.
Definitely. If we're jumping down to planters, what I'm proposing is metal, wood, earthenware, or ceramic, and a color which relates to the site. So I'm kind of not including resin. If you wanted to include high quality resin of some sort, that would be a variable that, again, John needs to prescribe these. What's high quality resin?
It's just a thought, because once you put something in place outside as a planter, if it gives out during the winter, you've lost it.
Yeah,
You're right. On the other hand, resin is forever. So
it's going to end up in the ocean. So the other thing about planters, since we jumped to planters, 3 feet high, and actually plants should not exceed a height of 6 feet. They should contain natural planting. They shall contain natural planting. Plants within the planter shall be maintained and replaced as needed. Empty planters or planters with decayed plantings, bare dirt or mulch are not permitted. And that's what other, I picked that up directly from, I can't remember where, from another municipality. And we also have this in section C8 already.
Types of plants, or are you talking about them being live plants?
Natural planting.
Yeah, I agree.
right, and maintained also,
And
Yeah.
maintain.
and not covered in mulch.
Right.
Well-
Again, I'll read it. I got it under 6.3. Plants within a planter shall be maintained and replaced as needed.
I mean, it's just like the baskets had been, throughout Annapolis.
Yep. So we cover planters. I talked about barriers, signs. Well, umbrellas are permitted. They have to be contained within the outdoor space. They must be at least 7 feet above the surface of the outdoor space. Specifically designed for outdoor use, fabric of a single color compatible with the related site. Again, I'm using generalities here. I'm not going to prescribe khaki. I don't think we should. Well, I mean, canvas-like material, flame-proof, no signage in the firms. There's two choices here in my mind. No signage at all, or signage that is just the name of the related establishment.
No signage.
No signage.
Please.
All right, you got it.
Yeah.
Clear?
I'm just going to say hallelujah.
Good. It's hard to open the door there. And again, I think we can provide examples. We have to do some homework, help John to show some compatible umbrellas and those maybe that aren't. For future, I also mentioned other shading devices such as freestanding awnings and suspended fabric shall comply. What I did here was say, okay, they need to comply with other design guidelines in terms of clutter and scale. We don't know what's coming, but on the city dock plan, you can see these shading devices. If they're huge and out of scale for the site, that's actually a violation, and not a violation. That's not consistent with other guidelines in the design guidelines, period. So I'm just saying.
I had some questions with regards to what was on his plans, and I saw a lot of sails.
I did too.
And I thought to myself, that kind of blocks the scenery.
Bingo. And we have a guideline about blocking historic views from the water and to the water.
With that in mind, Tim, on 4.1, you have R versus may for permitted umbrellas. Can we just use may and not R? It gives us a little more leeway to say no or yes.
Okay.
And so, Tim, when you're talking about umbrellas, are you talking about individual umbrellas for each table?
That's the definition of, yeah, not necessarily individual, just umbrellas within an outdoor space. We're not saying they have to be one, they don't have to be in the middle of a table. They can be market umbrellas that suspend, but they need to comply with these rules.
There
Because I
would
know
be
that we
a
already have.
limit in terms of, like, you couldn't like have two humongous umbrellas that look really like a tent. I mean, is it the idea that it doesn't look like a tent? I'm trying to think like some of
No, it's a good, we might need something about, again, scale is important here. Scale is related to the establishment.
Tim, you had a section in here somewhere that I really liked. Oh, there it is. It's under other fixtures. Busing station, storage, hostess table. I mean, that's one of the things I worry about is all of these extraneous other things, this clutter that starts popping up.
Yep.
Could I
that was actually in our, that's in our current, that's in the current guidelines too.
Right.
So that's good.
So one of the things, even though I don't like the way that the tents and the configuration of things in market space currently looks, one of the things that those restaurants have avoided is a busing station outside. Everything comes from within the restaurant.
Gosh, no.
It's in the
Iron
tent.
Rooster's got a huge busing station right in the middle, don't they?
It's in their tent.
They did.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's new.
3 of them in their tents. Yeah.
Right.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's new. They didn't have that 2 weeks ago.
Well, now that they got the rest of this winter to deal with, then God only knows.
You had that. You had Buddies, which had one. I think.
Yeah.
There was another one up the street that had one.
Yeah.
I think of the name offhand though.
Are we going to put the nix on that?
That's what the guidelines says. They're not permitted.
Yeah.
So, Tim, are you saying that and also you can't have any sides on your awnings, correct?
Awnings are permitted only to be attached to buildings, so none of these things can be attached to buildings.
But you can't have an awning like structure that has sides.
No, that wouldn't be permitted under the current
That's
guidelines.
a tent, yeah.
So
Current guidelines don't allow it. Yeah.
One of the proposed applications for a parklet, which I don't think will be successful because they don't have a lease, and it interferes with cars' turning radius. This is for 1771. Had 4x4 posts with a deck, lights strung between the posts. And of course, that would give the possibility for hanging some screening material there too. I'm just saying that's the way this is being thought about.
Yeah. So screening material maybe is another thing we need. No barriers, or that starts becoming a barrier.
Yeah, no string lights. Then you,
I didn't say no string lights and lighting. Well, real quick, we're touching on a lot of things. I want to go back to tents real quick. Tents are not allowed, except as permitted for events per planning and zoning requirements. Right now, there's a tent permit that's required, and they're typically,
yeah,
they're not allowed, according to our guidelines, tents aren't allowed.
and you can't have, some of those awnings now come that they're pre-lit. They have, the lights are attached to not to an awning, but to a umbrella.
One of the issues there, though, is getting power to those lights.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go up to Cafe Normandy Dale, they have cable or wire hanging over top of the sidewalk down to lights they have sitting out there.
It's pretty surprising that they don't get, enforcing these is going to fall to the, that falls not to John, but to other parts of the city.
I mean, we have picnic tables right now in front of Acme. I think it's Acme, but
well,
right,
they remove them. We go after them. They remove them and then they bring them back.
They're in the back too, in the rear, on the alley.
I don't think their tables in the rear are so bad. They've got the metal tables in the back.
Oh, I thought they were just picnic.
They're not. They're so heavy you can't pick them up and brawl with them. I think that's really good.
Well, I know Acme has had theirs sitting out now for several weeks. In fact, I think they've been there since the removal. But
right, right. So I think I also think that they really cut down on sidewalk passage. The free space.
They really did. It's like 4 feet there.
But Bill, I'm just going to say,
I know,
this
John,
would be round three.
I'm picking on you. I'm just, it's
well,
time to go out there with axes and tear them down.
Right.
Enforcement of
picnic tables custom made a few years ago. This all started a few years ago with the picnic tables, and then they were told they had them out front, and they were told they had to remove them. And I think they just moved them around back. So they're on Gorman now.
Well, right now they're sitting out front and have been there.
Enforcement under City Code Section 7.42.020 is a challenge, and it's not John's job to enforce that.
I'm not beating on John.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm not. I know you're not.
It is.
John's my friend.
The level of enforcement that is necessary to keep everybody, on the straight and narrow has gotten to a point where it's more than one person can do.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's become the Wild West out there.
Enforcement person.
Yeah.
Oh, now let me tell you a tiny success story that surprised everyone. So an email came out from one Ward 1 resident. Oh, things look terrible at outside AL Goodies. There are so many banners. And so I went across the street and I spoke to Michael Blonder, and I asked him to please take them down. And he said, well, a lot of other businesses have banners. I said, yes, but there's a complaint and you have an unusually large amount of banners. You have banners covering banners that haven't been removed, and he said, okay. And then I came in on Monday and they were down. And it really looks good. So
looks better.
Wow.
I've got to try to spread some of that persuasiveness around.
Yeah. And again, our whole point here in these guidelines is to reinforce our brand of quality and a historic landscape and historic sites and beauty. And if a property owner doesn't buy into the brand of quality that the historic district represents, we have a different problem that we can't overcome. And we just need to do the best we can to have guidelines that reinforce the historic district. The whole point, the beauty. I mean, you look at the code even says is to enhance public beauty. So,
well, Tim, may I also
banners aren't
suggest
beautiful.
Something that when these do get adopted, it would be really a good idea to do some kind of marketing program with them where they're provided to at least to all the restaurants downtown. I mean, I don't
Absolutely.
imagine anybody else is going to want it, but
Nope, I agree.
really heavily market them and present them maybe to the business association or
Toward Main Street.
John
Eric.
has, I've noticed, some free time where he's not,
Yeah, exactly.
and he's supposed to be working 24/7, and
And he hasn't been?
no, he hasn't. And so
Jackie, when we changed the clocks, I worked that hour too.
Oh boy.
So one day I worked 25 hours.
So 6 months later, you only work 23?
Yes.
Oh, we're getting pretty punchy.
I don't work that much. No.
I'll just bring up one more thing, and then I just want to wrap, because I thank all for hanging out. This is not these are difficult things to discuss at 10:15. But as far as light fixtures, I basically say that my proposal is they'll be at a pedestrian scale. They'll be removable on a 24-hour basis, which is interesting. That was in our current code. I don't know why. They shall not protrude beyond the site. Lighting designs that are related to planters and barriers are preferred, and lighting intensity shall be guideline D32 talks about intensity. But so the idea that they shall be freestanding would get to no string lights. That's how I address that. In light fixtures.
Want to make it a little tighter, make them self-contained, so they're battery powered.
Oh, that would be wild. Well, there's other.
No more wires over sidewalks.
Well, that will, again, that's an enforcement thing that's outside of our sandbox.
I understand, but if the requirement's not there, it can't be enforced.
Yeah, but I can't put a guideline in that is not within our sandbox, in my opinion. That's got to be it's got to be a violation in some other code, city code.
Once you attach, they're attached even by wiring to the building. I mean, that why is that not within your guidelines to preclude that? Because that would, to me, would be just like putting lights on the building.
So you're saying it's a visual, if it's a design, if you say it's clutter of design, I can put it in the, I would recommend we put it in the guidelines, but not the fact that it's a violation of an electrical code.
No, that's not what I'm saying. It is visual clutter.
Okay, I'll add that.
I don't think that there's any real reason why they should have to have electric lighting out there. I've been to many restaurants outside in DC where all they've had was candlelight, or
that's a
they've
good
had,
point. Yeah, that's a really good point, Leslie. Our current guideline says the streets of the historic district are well lighted by historically appropriate fixtures. Additional light is also provided through shop windows. So we could say lights need to be on the table.
exactly. And that way you remove any kind of, other problems that we're going to experience with electrical lighting.
That's all right. Then what we'll do, we'll make a distinction there. I'm trying to make this flexible enough to talk about the future as well for public spaces. So I'll make a distinction about dining and public spaces in the lighting section.
Okay.
All right, I can work with that. I talked about heating devices, basically similar, that they need to comply with safety regulations. They need to be contained within the space, and they need to be consistent with other design guidelines for scale, preservation of views, and avoidance of clutter.
Exactly.
So I want to constantly be referring, we can use other guidelines to enforce these things. And again, I think we can provide some examples in John's office.
Sure.
Signs in general are covered in great detail, 4 pages long in our guidelines already.
Yeah.
Within these things, they're pretty much not permitted because they'll exceed the square footage required. So we already have guidelines on signs.
Well, I was thinking of those umbrellas that people get from
the beer companies. Yeah, those are specifically
wine companies and
yeah. we're
that's
specifically,
a
we're
common-
specifically recommending that they're not permitted.
I
This is
think,
gonna eliminate those planters that John has designed that are made from neon tubing, I guess.
Absolutely, more neon. That's what we need is more neon.
Oma called me over the weekend, Jackie, and they won 100.
Oh my God. The last item is temporary flooring, which we talked about. There's no temporary flooring. And right now we want to reinforce that. So that's going to hit us when these parklets come along, because parklets have temporary flooring.
They
Don't
do?
they? Well, the ones that they've designed so far do. They
Raise them
extend,
up the street sidewalk
they
level.
raise them up to be the height of the sidewalk, so above the curb, equal to the curb.
Yeah.
And that
So-
has actually also, been a good thing from a safety point of view. And
Sure.
if you're stepping into the street, I think if you look at the one at Evelyn's where they have flooring in that one.
Yeah.
So, and we,
Well, we will, the temporary flooring one might flop back and forth a little bit more. We don't have that's not as much of a design challenge as the other. So this is a lot. And,
well, yeah.
The temporary flooring, we might not want to tackle in this particular pass, but it's in there. Currently, it's in there in our guideline. Will not approve it at any public sidewalk, period. It's poorly worded, but.
So are the parklets on the sidewalk?
They're
No.
extensions,
In the street.
effectively
No,
they're
they're-
extensions of the sidewalk into the street.
Well, they become extensions, yes.
Yeah, they take over parking places.
But what they're talking about is to put something down to level the surfaces.
Right.
Not so much putting a floor on the sidewalk, which I know it's a sort of a
No, that's a good point.
splitting hairs here, but
No, you're right. I think what they wanted when they wrote that, I think they wanted people not to put AstroTurf on top of brick.
yeah. So
Other boat scale.
okay, so a clarification of
Okay, I'll clarify
what
what
is.
it-
What
yeah, what
is.
is.
Nothing on the sidewalk, infills for parklets,
Yeah,
not to extend beyond the surface of the sidewalk.
yeah. Okay, I'll clarify that a little bit more. Good. Okay. So thanks. That gives me some input for our January meeting. We got confirmation from the Office of the Law from Mike Lyles that we can use the new process to approve these regulations. That was passed in May. We can review and approve these. We need to post it on the website for 30 days and send it to the City Rules Committee. During those 30 days, we can accept public comment. We can accept public comment in the January meeting, and then 30 days after that. We don't required to have to take public comment, but I think it's a good idea at the public meeting. It's worth it. And then it gets a little murky. The regulation becomes effective after our vote, but it doesn't become final until 2 meetings of the City Council. So effective and final are 2 different things in the code. Basically, the City Council needs to ratify it after we've approved it. So Mike Lyles laid that out for us and reiterated the code, which I had read. So this was put in place last May. I can't remember who the impetus was, but I have a feeling it might have been Sally Nash. One of the impetus where so many things weren't being changed because it required a City Council code change. This enables departments like historic preservation to promulgate regulations and put them in place and make them effective. So we're able to use this to change our guidelines.
So Tim, did Mr. Lyles tell you that the City Council actually has to vote on it to ratify it? Because I believe that we asked that question independently and we're told that's not what the code said.
That's correct. It's really weird. It's we notify them, any department notifies them, and then 2 meetings pass and it becomes final. So it's a
Right.
very
So they're
strange,
not really ratifying it. It's just sitting there. Sort of.
kind of, yeah. I don't understand why they chose that process, but that's right, Jackie.
Okay.
So we have a path forward for these to actually vote on them in January. If I can get your review and comment, we'll take public comment in January. We'll post them on the website for 30 days, but this gives John a draft to start working with the market space folks.
That'll be
Well,
great.
but I'm definitely looking forward to January, tightening things up, but it will give an opportunity to get rid of tents and hopefully make outdoor dining look that much better.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, they can keep their tents until March on market space right now. That was in their lease.
Yeah.
But,
That's correct.
But I can't remember the dates certain, but then they have to start complying with these guidelines in March.
Well, the fortunate part is that it is in their lease that they do have to comply with your guidelines. So I would say that's definitely a glass half full.
I agree.
Okay.
All right, so look for another version of this in the next few weeks. It'll be easy reading over the holidays. If you have any thoughts or questions in the meantime, please just shoot me an email, edit the document.
And then thoughts or comments or questions like, what should I get my wife for Christmas?
There you go.
Tim, help.
Whatever she wants. That's the safe answer.
Just do not get her an electric can opener. I made that mistake a few years ago.
Wow. Okay.
Was that a gag gift, Tim?
Rest you have bought for your wives.
That was terrible. I'll never live it down.
You should not live it down.
It's also for my own benefit. So.
And happy holidays to all of you.
All right. Could I have I think we're ready to adjourn. Thank you very much, everyone, for hanging in there tonight. This was a long meeting, but I think we accomplished a lot.
Yep.
And thank you again to our new commissioners. Yay, I'm getting your names added to the website.
Are you ready for a motion?
I am.
I move that we adjourn.
I second it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?